Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Unlocked the Ability to Manifest Items from Stories? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Objectively, it was, in fact, morally wrong to burn books. Izuku understood this fact, and he understood it very well. One should never burn a book, but he was pretty sure he could make an exception in this case. The metal waste bin was alight with the burning books. Sparks were spiraling up to the heavens, and Izuku was watching intently as they soared into the open air. 6 books, stacked one on top of the other, all reeking of smoke and lighter fluid. It was a pity, really, and a gratuitous waste of money. His mom was going to be upset, but what else was Izuku supposed to do? Just leave them? No, he could not, in fact, do that. The Hobbit was the last one to burn. Izuku tried to reassure himself that this was the correct decision. It wasn't like the Dmed thing would let him put it back in. If he could, this wouldn't be a problem. He could have kept the books, but no. No, the blasted object just couldn't let him do that. No, it had to do this. And here Izuku thought he could just have a sick sword to add to his collection in his room. Functionally, it was rather useless, as there were no orcs in the world he lived in, so it would not light up, but it could still stab things. And it would have been the perfect size for him, too, but no, of course Tolkien just had to make something sentient and also evil, and of course his quirk had to be hijacked by the DMN thing. Of course, because some god up there hated him, and one of these days Izuku would have to kill that god for its crimes. The crimes of inconvenience. Bring me my master, the being hissed against his chest, and Izuku frowned at the Dmed thing. He's too dim and big, he snapped as the sliding glass door behind him opened. Izuku, what are you doing? Mom asked from behind him, and Izuku let out a long, upset sigh. Books haunted, he replied. At least get the mithril before you waste all that power, Mom replied with a sniff. Ghost or not, the mithril is useful. I will, Izuku replied. He was pretty sure the other rings were never mentioned in The Hobbit, anyways. I'm making katsudon. Hurry up and finish, baby, Mom said and pressed a kiss to the top of his head. I will. Love you, Mom said, and the door shut, leaving Izuku with his terribly immoral burning trash. With a sigh, Izuku flipped open the worn, second-hand book and followed through the bookmarks of useful spots to find his marked spot of the mithril shirt gifted to Bilbo Baggins. Perpetually ink-stained fingers stroked over the words on the paper as he mouthed along to the katakana there, memorizing the words and repeating them as he read his special copy one last time. And then he pushed past the first layer as the ink stained his fingers, molded to his flesh, the paper skiing in his hand as he whispered the words before him. His ears were assaulted with the sound of Thorin Oakenshield's voice, and a smile twitched at his lips as his fingers wrapped around cool metal. With a tug, the shirt was achingly slowly pulled from the book, inch by inch, until it fell into his lap, fully formed and gleaming in the light of the fire. That was that. It was very pretty. A sigh escaped his lips, longing and quietly sad at the loss of such valuable resources for his collection, and then he tossed the final 7th book into the blaze. It was a sad thing, the burning of a book. Were he anyone else, this would have never mattered. But he was Midoriya Izuku, and he was pretty sure he was cursed. The mithril armor cast over his lap, he sat there for a moment, watching the papers curl in the flames, and then he sighed once again as he pulled the source of all of his problems out of his shirt. A single golden ring. Unobtrusive. Not a problem in the least. It didn't seem like much, sitting on that golden chain, and he stared at it in irritation. I'm not calling you precious, he said to the thing, and words formed in his mind. Bring me my master. Gremlin. You're going to be Gremlin, since you want to be so talkative. Ehole. The ring was dropped back into his shirt, and he stood up, mithril in hand, and opened the door. Annoying. This was all entirely annoying. What he wouldn't give to be able to just pull Mount Doom out of the Return of the King and be done with it. So why did you just burn your entire collection of Lord of the Rings? Mom asked patiently as Izuku picked at his katsudon with some form of rage he couldn't fully express in a way that required words. Told you. They're haunted, he mumbled and took a vicious bite of the chicken as the ring hung heavy around his neck. What was he supposed to even do with this thing? Leave it in the meadow? You couldn't exactly put the one ring in a safe deposit box. Yes, you said that, but I'm really lost as to how they're haunted, Mom said passively as she took a bite of her katsudon. Well, how was he supposed to explain this to his mom? She was his mother. How do I? It's not like you pulled out the one ring, right? His name is Gremlin. It just slipped out. A lifetime of never keeping secrets from his mother, and it was now coming to bite him in the butt. For a long, long moment, silence descended on the table, and Mom stared at him with a quiet calm that promised devastating consequences. Duh. And did you put Gremlin back? He wouldn't let me. So you let a piece of metal hijack your quirk? Mom clarified, and Izuku sunk down in his seat, stabbing the rice repeatedly with his chopsticks. Well, your usage of the word, let, implies that I had a choice in the matter. He just spat himself back out and smacked me in the face. Twice. He threw himself back out? You know objects are dead until I bring them out. He probably used the energy he got every time he came out to remove himself again. Or something. Why does the hunk of metal have a gender? I don't know, he was just showing some very male traits in the moment. It seemed fitting. Also, he has a masculine-coded voice and didn't complain when I called him he, so I think he's a male. He has a voice? Mom was looking extremely concerned, and Izuku desperately wanted to get out of his conversation, but also he couldn't help but correct her. Yes, of course he has a voice, he's canonically sentient. So putting him back was the equivalent of murdering him. She really did not look impressed. Please don't say that, Mom, you'll make me sympathize with him. You're the one that named him, not me. Well, I thought if I gave him a name now, he wouldn't convince me to call him Precious later. In hindsight, that was a stupid choice to make. Izuku, why did you grab him to begin with? I wasn't grabbing him, I was trying to grab Sting. He made me think he was Sting, but I pulled him out and instead of holding a dagger, I was holding a ring. It was very confusing. Why did you even go to Golem's scene anyways? You should have grabbed Sting in the troll cave. Sting's energy was more powerful in Golem's scene because the scene has more impact overall on the story itself. I thought he would come out more accurately from a more powerful scene. Izuku. Mom looked equal parts distressed and disappointed, and the ring burned against Izuku's chest as he sunk down in the chair, stabbing his chopsticks down into the bowl until it hit the bottom. Not being able to stand looking at her, he looked aside, out the window, where rain was first starting to come down. He won't be as powerful in this world. Sauron isn't a thing here beyond books, and I've explained that he's too big to pull out anyways, besides the fact that he's a living organism, which I can't manage, so there shouldn't be as much pressure to return him to a master that doesn't exist. Why he refused to go back to the book is beyond me, but I think he'll settle down once it's clear Sauron can't come out, and later we can revisit me returning him. And he has already been back in, so he's probably aware that within the book, he's dead. He's fully subservient to Sauron. He has no need to be alive if he can't serve him. That's one of the rules, right? I don't think it goes to the point of anything but blind obedience. His only sentience is tied to blind obedience, right? Just the burning urge to get back to him. It'll be fine. Just give him a month or two, I can throw a new copy in the meadow. He'll go back eventually without complaint. Izuku was really not treating this with the gravity the situation demanded, and he was well aware of this. But what else was he supposed to do? The universal laws of the One Ring were absolute. He was alive for his master, and his master alone. Once it became clear that Sauron could not join them in this universe, he wouldn't complain when Izuku put him back. Every object Izuku withdrew still followed the rules of the world they came from. Granted, he never pulled something alive out before, but even if the ring could adapt to this world, he was pretty sure the rules that made it real would prevail. He was pretty sure, anyways. You're human, Izuku, the ring corrupts absolutely, and men are canonically more prone to corruption, Mom pointed out, and Izuku groaned. That breaks the rules, Mum. I am not a man of Middle-earth. I'm a man of Earth. The rules of the universe don't apply to me, they apply to him. At most, he'll be an inconvenience. I'm not going to go full-on evil. I didn't suddenly develop force sensitivity when I pulled out a holocron and opened it, remember? I don't know, you had me concerned there for a minute, Mom said dryly, and Izuku rubbed at his eyes. It's all fine, he assured her. I've pulled out worse things before, and I didn't lose my mind. Remember the whole deal with the Eldritch Goo? I'd rather not actually. Well, as far as I recall, I just got sick and ruined my dry clean only coat with vomit, Mom reminded him, and he winced. Sorry. I told you those books were trouble. And I now humbly apologize for the millionth time. Uncle Asuma got you a new coat, remember? Izuku, I'm just worried, alright? I know. But it'll be fine. Bring me my master, Gremlin hissed again, and Izuku whacked at his shirt in irritation, as if that was going to do anything. Did he just talk? Mom asked, and Izuku rubbed at his eyes. He sounds like a broken record. I'm trying to enjoy my dinner here. So what are you going to do about him in the meantime? Mom asked, and Izuku sighed in defeat. I don't know. I honestly didn't think ahead that far. I can't just leave him in like a safe deposit box, and I have no idea how he'd react in the meadow, since he's already proven he can interact with my quirk in some way. I don't want to just leave him laying around either, so I guess he's just going to be stuck with me for now. I distinctly remember that the ring burned Frodo's neck with the weight of it, Mom pointed out diplomatically. How are you going to cover that? That didn't happen for years. It'll be fine. He'll be here for a few months at the most. When he agrees to go back, I'll get a new copy of The Hobbit and pop him back in once it's charged. So you're going to take that thing to school? To middle school? I don't think they could possibly act worse, so, yeah, I'm taking him to middle school. I'd rather pull you out sick for a few months and homeschool you, Mom said dubiously. I can handle it. His power is not going to be on the level of his power in Arda. There's no magic in this world for him to pull off of. He's solely based on the power of my quirk. It's nothing comparable to what's essentially an angel. He can probably affect maybe one person, and the full extent of his power isn't even really defined, anyways. I really don't like this, Izuku. Pulling me out of school would look extremely suspicious, Mom. Like really suspicious. I think Kacchan is convinced I have a quirk already. He'd freak out and storm up here demanding answers I don't want to give, and Izuku. Mom's tone was serious. Far too serious. Izuku's eyes drifted back down to his bowl of katsudon and he fell silent, picking at individual panko breadcrumbs with a frown on his face. It's fine, Mom. You know I can outrun him. I can talk to Mitsuki. Don't. You know what she's like. She'd just make everything worse. She's not. Mom trailed off and Izuku frowned at his food. She is and they aren't listening to anyone because his quirk is too volatile. It's fine. You need to stop protecting him, baby. It would be a lot easier if I wasn't quirkless. We could just say it's a teleportation quirk. We don't need to do all of this. We talked about this, Izuku. Even teleportation quirks are rare and raise a lot of questions. Quirkless is safe. No questions are better than even one. And besides, you're 13. A quirk showing up now would just be even more suspicious. Uncle Asuma said it could be done if I just switch schools. Uncle Asuma also said we could forge government documents, which is illegal, and he shouldn't have said that, considering his job is to enforce the law. Izuku sighed and sunk down even lower in his chair, tapping his chopsticks on the table as he finally lowered himself so he was eye level with his bowl. Is it so bad to want to be a hero? He mumbled. It is, Izuku, Mom said gently. Sometimes life isn't about whether you can, it's about whether you should. I think today is a pretty good example of why you shouldn't. I didn't cause the apocalypse. No, you just pulled the harbinger of the apocalypse out of a book. And it didn't even make you break a sweat. If Dad was here, we wouldn't be having this discussion, Mom said. And he's not here. He's not going to be here again. Please, Izuku. Just take care of Gremlin and we'll deal with everything else as it comes, all right? All right, Izuku mumbled. You have school tomorrow. Hurry up and eat and get your shower, okay? I'm not hungry. Can I put it in the fridge? Izuku asked, and Mom sighed before nodding once. I'm sorry, honey, she said gently. But please, understand that it's my job to protect you, okay? Okay, Izuku said and pulled himself up from the table, picking up his bowl to wrap up. It wasn't often that he turned down Kacchan, but today was definitely a day that called for it. Honestly, his life would have been so much easier if he actually was quirkless. Or just had a teleportation quirk. When it first came in, Izuku was 6. Mom had been cautious about it from the get-go, especially when he described the meadow and bookshelf in the center of it, complete with a comfortable armchair and a babbling creek and flowers that never wilted. At that point, his father was already gone. Izuku didn't know why, and Mom didn't explain it. Not until she was sure that it was what it was. Dad supposedly breathed fire. In reality, he had swallowed a pearl when he was young from an old tabletop RPG book, an item that allowed the user to breathe fire. The dragon's egg, it was called. Officially, his quirk was fire breath. On paper, in front of his peers, he breathed fire. But things didn't add up. He had the ability to reach into a book and pull out small objects, the only requirement being that they weighed less than half a pound. Questions began to arise, and by the time Izuku was 5, his secret was out, and he disappeared. And thus, Izuku was all that was left. And Mom opted to keep him registered as quirkless the first day he pulled a flower out of a book. People overlooked quirkless kids, didn't think to look deeper than they should. And Izuku was comfortable with that for a while. He'd already been quirkless for 2 years until that point, and when Mom explained that Dad had to leave because of his quirk, Izuku had taken it as a sign that he would have to leave if the truth ever came out. The Libriomancer's Library. That was the name of his quirk, but it didn't do it justice. It was a hot mess, and Izuku was pretty sure it was a cruel joke of some nameless god trying to ruin his day on a daily basis. Whatever he did in his past lives must have been especially heinous. All of these thoughts were swirling around his head as he put his Kacchan away in the fridge and ran through the motions of his shower. Really, he needed to just ban specific books from his meadow. Just outright ban them. Harry Potter needed to be thrown out, Magic Ex Libris could go right after them. Honestly, who thought it was a good idea to write such a mockery of his life, anyways? He had a bone to pick with Jim C. Hines, even if he did give him the name of his quirk. Why did he put those books in there, anyways? Izuku was beyond frustrated. There was even a copy of Arthurian legends, though that was mainly for his sword collection. But he could pull out the Holy Grail if he wanted. He really needed to stop including so many temptations. By the time he stumbled towards the bedroom, hair wet and dripping, he was thoroughly finished with life and ready to pass out, but he always went in to check. Pushing the door to his bedroom open, Izuku took a deep breath and stepped once, his body flickering out of existence as he was pulled into the meadow. The scent of grass and flowers and a river hit his nostrils, and Izuku took a deep breath, tilting his head back. The meadow wasn't large. This was a pocket dimension he wasn't sure where or how it existed, but it was his. It stretched on forever, just a field of wildflowers rustling in the breeze, with a river that ran upstream, never downstream, because that made sense. There was always a light breeze here on his skin, and it was never too hot or too cold. Seasons didn't exist here. Flowers came in all shapes and sizes, and pollen never caught in his nostrils or made his nose burn. There was a sun and clouds, never to cover the light, only complement it, and while this perfect place was the bane of his existence, it was also the only place he felt like he could breathe easily. The bookshelf towered in the center of the meadow. Carved from maple, it always smelled of fresh lumber, despite the nice stain. It was the only thing here that changed next to the armchair. It had started out small, but with every book added, it only expanded. Front and back, it was carved in an octagon cut in half, curved around the armchair, with books on the outside and inside. There were well over 1,000 books now, and whenever he needed to climb to reach one, he simply needed to call the ladder to himself and it would appear. Pushing through the tall grass and swaying wildflowers, Izuku came up on his library and stared up at it. A stray breeze ruffled his hair, and without a word, Izuku pulled out the nearest book and curled up in the yellow, floral armchair, eyes locked on the words before him as he opened to the bookmark to remember why he marked this book to begin with. The Dresden Files. It was the shield bracelet he was eyeing. He recalled that Dresden dropped the bracelet after discovering it could block fire, but not heat, but it wasn't like Izuku was ever going to be worrying about such things. He wasn't going to be a hero, anyways. He didn't know when he got into Western books. It was probably when Mom got a lone postcard with no return address featuring Times Square 5 years ago, just a mild confirmation 3 years after his departure that Dad was still alive. She'd cried over it, and it took Izuku a while to understand why. In fact, he didn't fully grasp it until he read the Japanese translation of The Wide Window, from a series of unfortunate events, and went back through the postcard, written in English, to figure out the errors. Mom filed the death certificate, as per his request, a week later. Izuku pretended to not notice and didn't tell a soul. Neither did Mom, but it was clear from that moment. Dad was alive in America and was never coming home. He was setting her free to find a new partner, but she never did. After that, Izuku started learning English, reading every American book he could get his hands on, just to feel a little closer to his still-living father. To death do we part. That's what I promised. Not a fake death, Izuku. He's still mine. That's what Mom said. Izuku didn't say anything about it. He just went and learned English. He didn't like it, but parents weren't parted by death. Dad would always be Dad. So, he supposed he understood. He didn't. Uncle Asuma didn't get it either. Izuku had never seen them fight before, but he recalled very clearly his uncle coming to the apartment, gun still at his hip, mask and hat still on, to tell Mom off about the whole ordeal. If he wants to be dead, let him be dead, he said. Izuku hadn't even known he could get mad like that, but Mom held her ground, and Izuku eventually ended up running off to the library, locked away until his little comlink he pulled out of a Star Wars novel pinged with his mom telling him to get back. They all sat down and had dinner that night. He told Mom to move in with him since Dad wasn't coming back. She said no, and that was it. It was never brought up again. Lots of things were never brought up again. This incident would probably not be brought up again too. "Bring me my master," Gremlin hissed, and Izuku pursed his lips. "Shut up," he muttered. "You're probably not even 10 carat. I am 24 and you are rude. Oh, so you can say other things. Bring me my master. Even if I could, I wouldn't. You smacked me in the face. Twice. It was cold. I'm not engaging with you. Bring me my master." Izuku just rolled his eyes and flipped to the next page. Gremlin. It was a gremlin, and he had decided to never stand. Wow, he looks worse than normal. Izuku was so tired. 5 weeks. 5 weeks spent arguing endlessly with the single-minded and hilariously stubborn One Ring until 3 in the morning without fail. The thing didn't need to sleep, so he naturally took advantage of that fact of life and used it against Izuku. Gratuitously. Every night, Izuku laid down to sleep, and every night, it was an endless litany of gimme, gimme, gimme. He simply could not conjure up Sauron, and if he could, he would have at this point if only to shut the thing up. Gremlin was relentless, and it was an actual wonder Izuku's grades hadn't slipped. He had never thought he'd need the time turner from Harry Potter, and yet here he was, using it to get 8 hours of sleep. Realistically, manipulating time itself was a blatant abuse of his power, but he didn't know what else to do. "Hey, Deku," Kacchan said as he passed his desk and kicked the leg. "Wake the hell up." "I am awake," Izuku mumbled into his arms. His jacket was buttoned wrong, and for now, he was going to stay down until he figured out what to do about it before anyone noticed. "What, do you think you're better than all of us all of a sudden? Too good to pay attention in class?" Kacchan demanded, and Izuku shifted to glare at him with a single lone eye. "The last bell hasn't even rung," Izuku retorted before burying his head back down. "And?" Kacchan demanded angrily, and Izuku burrowed down even more, refusing to engage him. "Slit his throat," Gremlin whispered. "Feast on his entrails." Maybe Izuku had only read the works of Tolkien a handful of times, but he didn't recall Sauron engaging in cannibalism or encouraging it. But what did he know? At this point, he was willing to scrub anything to do with Tolkien from his brain with bleach. And maybe cyanide if that was what it took. Slithis throat, slithis throat, slithis throat, Gremlin chanted, and Izuku grit his teeth in irritation. What the hell is wrong with you lately anyways? Kacchan demanded and kicked the leg of his desk again. You trying to die by sleep deprivation, huh? Or are you just becoming a hikikomori? That's not what that means, Izuku muttered into the desk. Kill him, kill him, kill him, sacrifice him to the master. If this demon ring did not shut up, Izuku was going to throw it into the ocean and let it sort itself out there. Oh, so you know more than me now? Kacchan taunted, and Izuku hunched up his shoulders. No, yes. Izuku knew a lot more than Kacchan, thank you kindly. Then look at me. Go glut yourself on attention somewhere else, Kacchan, Izuku mumbled. I'm busy. Busy trying to ignore the litany of increasingly creative ways to kill someone invading his brain. There was a brief flashback of a small, feral little creature bashing a goblin's head in with a rock in a dank cave, delighting at the idea of raw and wriggling meat, and Izuku squeezed his eyes shut tight. Not you, the ring crooned, and Izuku sure hoped so, but he wasn't going to trust the thing. You would be the Nazgul. 13 years old, and he was being offered such a prestigious position. How kind of the ring? Izuku always dreamed about running around for all eternity in all black with metal shoes designed to practically gorge someone open, screaming to his heart's content and ascending beyond the traditional definition of using his words to solve his problems. Actually, despite the sarcasm, the idea of being able to scream someone to death wasn't that bad. He could be a goth present mic. There is Nazgul here? Gremlin asked, once again proving he had no concept whatsoever of personal privacy, and Izuku snorted at the idea of the fun and chatty radio host trying to work his way into a Nazgul robe. Oh. Yeah. Honestly, Gremlin was not that bright. Izuku could forgive ignorance, the poor thing really only did know the rules of his creation, and possibly understood the history of Middle-earth, but with the whole single-minded, bring me my master, thing, he really did not notice any details of the world around him. It took him a full 2 weeks to even notice men were apparently magical, and Izuku just told him to pay attention, because he was not going to explain everything. He did pay attention at least, and had developed a deep loathing of Kacchan. Or, perhaps, was using him as a vessel to corrupt Izuku, but that was probably the wrong target to pick. Izuku knew what went on at home for him. Nothing Izuku could do would be worse than that, so why even bother, even if he did wake up one day and decide to start to genuinely hate Kacchan rather than simply detest him? Quirks make no sense, Gremlin muttered, for perhaps the millionth time, and while Izuku could not agree more, considering his own capabilities, he also did not want to hear that again. Present Mike could yell really loud, that wasn't that confusing. Gremlin should be more concerned about puzzling out Izuku's own quirk. Kacchan was yelling at Izuku, while Izuku was busy battling the ongoing stream of violent consciousness in his head. Did you just say to me, Deku? Izuku finally lifted his head and blinked at Kacchan blearily with utterly dead eyes. Did he have an absence on his record yet? I think I'm sick, Izuku said and abruptly stood, gathering up his bag. I'm going home. The bell rang, and Izuku pushed right past Kacchan and made for the door. Hey! Kacchan shouted and planted a hand on Izuku's shoulder, pulling him back, and Izuku went stock-still, staring at the door. The hell's wrong with you? I'm sick, Izuku repeated faintly. I'm going home. The hell do you mean you're sick? I mean I'm about to cough on you and ruin your perfect attendance if you don't take your hand off my shoulder, Izuku said bluntly, and Kacchan released him. Shrugging his book bag onto his shoulder, Izuku ignored the stunned silence and walked right out the door as he pulled out his phone to text his mom. Izuku, I don't want to deal with Gremlin and Kacchan at the same time today. I'm going home. Can you call me in sick? A turn, and he was clattering down the stairs as he considered just using the meadow to get home. The long walk seemed too much right now, and Gremlin was especially heavy today. Mom, if Gremlin is that bad, your uncle can meet you at home. Izuku, he has a job, Mom. I'll be fine on my own. Mom, I don't get off until late, he doesn't patrol today, I'll ask him to swing by after school. Izuku, I'll just be in the meadow. There's no need. Mom, you fixed the cell reception issue, he'll text you when he's off and meet you at the apartment. I'm calling the school now. Okay, Steamroller Mom was reporting in. Izuku just sighed and rubbed at his eyes as he turned into the locker room where his outside shoes were waiting for him. Izuku, thanks. Have a good day at work. And don't worry about me. Gremlin is just providing cannibalism as a viable option to solve problems, and I think I'm ready to mentally check out. Cannibalism does solve problems. It really doesn't, Izuku muttered under his breath as he unlocked his locker to retrieve his shoes. The door slammed open behind him and he dropped his head, sighing quietly to himself. Deku, what the hell is wrong with you lately, huh? Kacchan demanded, and Izuku toed off his slippers. Nothing, he replied. I'm just getting sick. Sick of the One Ring of Power uttering an endless litany of creative deaths in his brain. That's not what's wrong, and I'm sick of you acting like you can just hide shit. Kacchan shouted, and Izuku tossed the slippers into the locker before slamming the door shut. Last bell rang. You're tardy, Izuku bit out. Maybe worry about your own education instead of one useless quirkless kid. I told Sensei I was going to make sure you didn't collapse. Kacchan snapped, and Izuku whirled on him. One of these days you're going to meet a teacher that doesn't enable you, and then what are you going to do? Izuku demanded, and Kacchan rushed up on him, slamming his body into the lockers with bruising force, his burning hands singing Izuku's jacket. Kill him! Gremlin screeched, and Izuku grit his teeth. For all you know, Kacchan hissed, maybe I was making sure you didn't collapse. Liar, Izuku breathed. I'm going to find out what you're up to, Kacchan promised. I'm up to collapsing into my bed and sleeping off this bug, Izuku replied and glared up at Kacchan. And you're up to leaving me in the dust and acing practice exams for UA. Got it? You're such a liar, Kacchan spat. I know you're lying. And I'm sick of it. You may have the whole school fooled, but I know you're hiding something. Because you know me so well? Izuku challenged. There Kacchan went again with his wild conspiracy theories. People don't just stop caring that they're useless, Deku. Izuku stared at him as Kacchan's hands started to spark off. There it was all over again. Kacchan always wanted Izuku to care just as much as he did that he was quirkless. If Izuku didn't care, that meant it didn't matter, and Kacchan couldn't stand the idea that quirks didn't matter. If I care, nothing will change anyways, Izuku murmured. Some things don't change. You should probably accept that. Izuku should probably accept that. Kacchan abruptly released him just as Gremlin let out an unending screech in Izuku's ears, and the ring turned white-hot against his chest. Pain hit Izuku full force, and he inhaled sharply as his hand went up to his chest to grasp at it. Izuku breathed in clear English at the mounting pain, and Gremlin abruptly went ice-cold as he realized what he did, but the telltale scent of burnt flesh filled the air, and Kacchan stumbled back in shock, eyes wide. He thought he burned Izuku's skin. The irony was breathtaking. Izuku could use this. Stop talking to me, Izuku mumbled as he clutched at his burning. It was burning so much, chest, and I won't tell. I didn't. I don't care. Izuku spat and grabbed his shoes before turning to the door. I don't care. He was so sick of Kacchan continuously making his complexes Izuku's problem. Perhaps if Izuku was actually quirkless, he would care. Perhaps if Izuku had nothing to hide, he would constantly be seeking Kacchan's approval, or at least cowering in front of him. But instead, no. Izuku had to have a stupidly powerful quirk and had to hide. He had to pretend to care that he was quirkless, when in reality this same quirk, or a variation of it, had taken his father away from him. It broke up his family. It got him stuck with the One Ring of Power, which apparently was throwing a temper fit and branding his chest, and Izuku was twisted enough to blame Kacchan for it because keeping his secret was more important than being honest. Izuku could reach into any book he wanted and eviscerate Kacchan. He could cut him clean in half with a lightsaber. He could turn him into dust with a phaser. He could take over the world with this med ring, if he figured out a way to make it work with this universe's rules, and not even worry about Sauron coming to reclaim it. He could do anything, and that's why he had to hide, because he wanted none. But people didn't realize that the imagination of man was the single most powerful force on the planet, and all of that power was in the hands of a 13-year-old boy. And Izuku wanted nothing to do with it. Slamming open the door of the Genken, he walked right out with his shoes in hand, leaving Kacchan behind as the guilt of what he'd just done weighed on him. You could kill him. I'm not you. Tears stinging his eyes, the overwhelming situation crashed in on him, and he abruptly realized that there was a wall of windows behind him, and he couldn't even run away to his meadow. Why couldn't he just have a teleportation quirk? Why couldn't he just have that? Because Dad had a fire-breathing quirk, and Dad still had to leave. And Mom didn't want a fugitive for a son. She wanted a son that led a sad life, but still had a life. Angrily, Izuku wiped at his eyes as the pain throbbed across his chest. The smell of burnt flesh followed him, and he rushed out the gates in socked feet and looked for the nearby alley where he could vanish from reality and hole himself back up with his books. He'd fallen asleep in the armchair, and Gremlin had let him. Izuku didn't even realize he had fallen silent until he woke up to a ringing phone. Uncle Asuma was calling him, and Izuku had completely slept the day away. Fumbling for the phone, Izuku sleepily answered it and blinked blearily. Hey, he mumbled and rubbed at his crusty eyes. Figured. Inko said you were having jewelry problems? Uncle Asuma asked, far too lightly, and Izuku groaned as he tried to sit up from his haphazard position. His shirt pulled painfully at his chest, and he briefly realized it had apparently stuck to a scab. Izuku groaned and gingerly touched at his chest before wincing. Something like that. The jewelry problems had not been so severe the last time he talked to Mom. School just let out. Mind if I swing by? I'm fine, really, I don't need to be babysat, Izuku mumbled and pressed his fingers to his pounding temple. That was a migraine. Even Frodo needed a kid. I'll see you in about 20 minutes, okay? Oh, so this was a non-negotiable sort of thing. Noted. Yeah, I'll see you, Izuku mumbled. And check your texts. Your mom is worried, Uncle Asuma added, and it was then that Izuku realized he had been passed out for a full day, and his phone had gone unanswered for a full day when he was supposed to be awake and able to account for where he had been. Oh. I told her you were probably sleeping, don't worry, his uncle assured him. She thought so too. Thanks, Izuku said, now thoroughly abashed. He still smelled like burnt flesh and fabric. He had to shower before Uncle Asuma got to the apartment. Alright, see you soon. Snipe, the staff meeting is the other way, someone called in the background, and Izuku cringed. Sorry, Razorhead, got a family emergency. His uncle replied cheerfully. I just agree with everything you have to say, how about that? Since when does family keep you from a staff meeting? The man on the other end grumbled. Nephew. Trouble at school. Inko's working late, Uncle Asuma explained, and Izuku just cringed even harder. Never mind. See you tomorrow. There it was again. The quirkless nephew. The father possibly killed himself nephew. The high chance of suicide nephew. That he probably won't make it to 18. Izuku probably hated that, the most out of everything else. Sorry, Izuku. I'll be there soon, Uncle Asuma promised. Yeah, Izuku muttered and peeked under the collar of his unbuttoned jacket to survey the damage. His white shirt was soaked in red. How did he even manage to sleep like that? You okay? I'm fine, Izuku bit out. I'll see you in a bit. Not waiting for a reply, he hung up and took a deep, deep breath, letting the ache ground him in the moment. He could use Lucy's cordial from Narnia. He should have done that before he fell asleep. But that was more of a near-death thing, not avoiding a scar. Mom would find out anyways. If Uncle Asuma didn't find out first. With a groan, Izuku came to his feet and stepped out of the meadow into the bathroom of the apartment. He looked like a wreck. Dull green eyes met his in the mirror, and he memorized the bags beneath them, deep purple against brown skin. Apparently sleep hadn't fixed that. His carefully managed curls were a mess, mushed up on one side, and he realized it was time for a wash already, if only to fix the mess. One of these days he'd break and ask his uncle to help him with dreads, but today was not that day. Maybe in another month or so. It was one hell of a commitment, after all, and Izuku had enough commitments right now. Tired fingers slowly and steadily undid the jacket, and he stared at the massive patch of red on the front of his shirt. Gremlin had really gone overboard. What kind of burn even was that? His shirt was stuck to his skin. Maybe he really did need the cordial. You really didn't need to do that, Izuku mumbled. If you will not kill him, he will have to leave you alone somehow, Gremlin hissed, and Izuku dropped his head in defeat. I managed for 9 years with him harassing me. I don't need your help. Especially help like this. How am I supposed to hide this from my mom? He demanded as he pulled at the shirt. It was stuck. Stuck to his scab. This was bad. Do you not have cordial? Gremlin taunted, and Izuku hissed. If I didn't, would you still have done it? He asked. Yes. I'm not about to start keeping secrets from my mom, Izuku snapped. And you aren't going to make me start lying to her. She is a problem. No, you're the problem. I cannot bring Sauron here, do you understand? He's too big, and he's an organism. And he wouldn't fit in this universe, anyways. There is no Arda to take over. There is no Mayor or Aner or Vala or whatever. There are no elves, there is no afterlife, there is nothing to claim. And even if I did bring him here, he wouldn't be able to release Melkur from this side. You understand that, right? It would be pointless. There isn't even magic here. Just quirks, and we have our own problems. Bring me my master, Gremlin insisted, and Izuki in an irritated breath. I have 20 minutes to shower and get cleaned up. I'm not talking to a FING ring. You weren't even talkative like this in the books. You're already breaking the rules. Of course Izuku had to get stuck with the sentient, adaptable ring. There are no rules. The rules are clear. We have quirks. My quirk allows me to create things from the pages of books, but it is determined by the size of the book. The book has to accumulate energy for 1 month in the meadow before I can use it. You aren't even actually from that universe. You're just made by the laws of that universe as described by the book. Sauron doesn't even exist. Do you understand? My master exists. White-hot pain again, and Izuku gasped, falling to the ground, but it didn't even stay around long enough to burn. It simply dissipated, gone like the wind, and frustrated tears spilled from Izuku's eyes. If there is any master, it's me. I made you. You get it? And if I tell you to go back in the FING book, you go back in the book. Can't, Gremlin whispered, and for a moment he almost sounded confused. What do you mean you can't? Izuku demanded. Cold. Izuku let out a frustrated groan and banged his head on the tile. Of course it's cold, it's a book, there's no life. It's just words on paper. I don't want to be cold. Objectively, Izuku knew the ring was supposed to be manipulative. He knew it was supposed to lie and make promises and appeal to someone. But by the laws of Tolkien, it was supposed to be appealing to his lust for power. Which, realistically, Izuku did have. He was human, after all, and the power he knew he wanted was the power to be himself and not have people ruin his life for his quirk. Gremlin could appeal to that. He knew Izuku's deepest desires. Hell, he was thinking them right now. They were always at the forefront of his mind. It was all-consuming some days, the frustration, the understanding of the fact that he knew why things had to be the way they were, and the understanding that it made sense. His father had tried to pass it off as another quirk, and look where that got him. A fake death certificate and his family entirely unaware of his survival. For all Izuku knew, he could be dead, and Mom was holding out for a ghost. She might as well be. So he knew. And yet he still wanted to rebel. He was 13 after all, and according to the books he read, 13 was when that happened. Well, 13 to 16. He was at the cusp of being able to save the world, and he could do nothing because he could objectively DMN it too. Gremlin knew that. He knew that very well. So why on earth was he playing to Izuku's sympathy? Since when did the Ring of Power care about death? It was only sentient so long as Sauron needed it, and death didn't matter if Sauron didn't need it. Here's the point where you swear that I'm your master, and I stupidly believe you, and we move on and you corrupt me and turn me into some pathetic being eating live fish, Izuku muttered. I don't want to be cold, Gremlin repeated. Even if you enslave me to your will, that will not change what my capabilities are, Izuku said. I have a quirk. I cannot make a whole living Maya. It doesn't work like that. You're small, and it's pretty damn unlucky that you're small. I can't even pull living beings out of books. I tried with a worm once and it died and I felt guilty for weeks. If it's an organism, it doesn't work. You're just the loophole. Even if Sauron turns into, like, a bird in the Silmarillion, I have no idea if he does that, but even if he does that, it doesn't work. Do you understand that? Just let me put you back with your actual master. You won't be alive anymore, but you'll be with him. That's what you want, right? To be with him? I'll even, I don't know, put you with him when he first makes you, before Eregion and the whole mess with Celebrimbor, I think. If it makes you feel better. But I'll be cold, the ring whispered and Izuku hissed. He could still feel the pain of getting smacked in the face. But you'll be with him. That's the rule of Middle-earth. You want to be with him, right? Cold. Izuku hissed out from between his teeth and sat up, back to the cool bathroom cabinets. This makes no sense, he muttered. He'd never brought out something sentient before. Should he try it with a Star Wars droid next? What was even going on here? I don't want to be cold, Izuku. That was new. The ring never called him by his name before. I'm not your master, Izuku blurted, because he was apparently in a handbasket and hell was the next stop on the way. You got that right? No. I'm not your master. I'm not Sauron. I don't even want you. You aren't Sauron. Glad we got that covered. I don't want to be cold. Whatever. You won't be cold. Happy? No. What will make you happy? Gremlin fell silent and Izuku rubbed at his eyes. How was he going to handle this? The ring was apparently adapting to the new universal laws, and this was entirely uncharted territory. What do you want? Not cold. So you don't want to go back into the book? Got it. What else do you want? You can't give me Sauron? Not master now? What even was Izuku's life? No. We covered this. We've covered this for the past month. Then nothing. Great. This is grand. If you're sticking around, we need some ground rules. 1. I do not trust you by yourself in the meadow. You stick with me until I figure out what the hell is going on with you. Good. 2. Stop telling me to kill people. Stop detailing what a blood eagle looks like. Stop telling me about how to reach into someone's mouth and pull out their throat. That was way too far. Stop telling me to eat people. And lay off Kacchan. I literally just don't want to deal with him. Not good. Too bad. 3. If you ever burn me again, I will. Well, now threatening him with the coal just seemed incredibly wrong. Izuku should have never named the DMN thing. I will put you in a box and leave you there, for like, a week. Or something. I'll get creative with it. Got it? Got a box. Shut up. It's not like you have intestines I can threaten to pull out of you. I'm not using you. Got it? Your job is just to sit there and not do anything, because I am not dealing with that. And I'm not pulling out the other rings for you either. I have no interest in turning people into Nazgul, and you have no business turning people into Nazgul, and I am not giving you to someone with an interest in turning people into Nazgul. Do you understand? Not even one Nazgul? Not one. Just one. I said no. You will say yes eventually. Whatever. Izuku stood up and faced his reflection once more, frowning at the mess before glancing at his almost dead phone, frowning at the time. 10 minutes before his uncle got here. Unlocking the phone, he scrolled through his texts before sending a quick message to his mother, informing her that he was sleeping in the meadow, and then he navigated to his uncle's chat to tell him he was going to be in the shower and to just let himself in. The adults taken care of, Izuku then met his injury. If he took the cordial, would that be lying? He should wait for his mom to get home, so she could at least see it. But in the meantime, he had to take the shirt off. Not eager to rip the scab off, he turned on the sink and cupped the warm water that sprang out, splashing it on his front to loosen the shirt. Gremlin was thankfully silent, apparently mollified for now, and didn't even complain about water for once. Izuku focused on soaking the shirt enough to peel it off, watching as red droplets landed on the counter. Slowly but surely, the fabric unstuck itself from his skin, and Izuku started to unbutton it, peeling it off to examine the damage. Dried blood was everywhere. In the center of his chest, just under the ring, was a perfectly burned circle, ugly and red and open, and Izuku hissed at the sight of it. The ring was covered in his blood, and perhaps that was what the ring needed to satiate its burning desire to murder everything in sight. If you ever do this again, you're getting stuck in the neighbor's compost, Izuku muttered angrily as he finally started to strip. What is compost? Artfully rotted vegetables, Izuku spat. It smells. What, like you have a nose? I manage. I'm sure. This called for a cold shower. He didn't even want to think about warm water on this right now. I'm serious. Don't do this again. I won't. Not that I believe you, but thanks. I guess Gremlin was a good name for you. It was not. You got a better name? No. Then we're sticking with Gremlin. Gods, how was he going to explain this to his uncle? Uncle Asuma had been staring at him for a while now. Realistically, it was Izuku's own fault for walking out in a towel when he could have just hopped into the meadow and out into his bedroom. He was hoping to break this to him a bit more gently, but Gremlin had CD out all of his brain cells with his most recent stunt, and he was still tired from 5 straight weeks of sleep deprivation. An 8-hour nap was not going to fix this. But the damage was done. Izuku was dripping wet with his twist out done up, and Uncle Asuma was half in his hero costume, staring at Izuku blankly, green eyes fixed on the circular brand on his chest. Hey, Izuku? Yeah. What's that? Gremlin got upset. Okay, take him off. Can't do that. Why can't you do that? We made a deal. You made a deal with the One Ring of Power. I made a deal with the One Ring of Power. Did that deal come before or after he branded you? After. Did that deal include a brand? Well, no, but I can explain. You'd better explain fast. Izuku took a deep breath and looked down at the towel wrapped around his waist before looking back up at Uncle Asuma with feeling, and Asuma pursed his lips in a way that screamed that he was very displeased with Izuku before he waved a hand, indicating for Izuku to go get changed. Breath caught in his throat, Izuku whisked into the bedroom and slammed the door shut, leaning against it with wide eyes. His bedroom was actually a mess. There were books everywhere, haphazardly placed Snipe and All Might posters here and there, because Asuma got his feelings hurt when years went by without Izuku adding any merch to his bedroom, like any 10-year-old wanted their uncle watching them while they slept. A wall was entirely overtaken with a variety of swords he had pulled out of books, all mounted and shining and seemingly very good replicas, and Jango Fett's blasters and Count Dooku's lightsaber were on his desk, complete with a post-it reminder from his mom to never use them. Shoved in the drawers of his desk were a collection of baubles from dawdling in his books, including multiple vials of Lucy's cordial and thermal detonators, because who didn't want a thermal detonator? Dresden's shield bracelet was on the nightstand, and Izuku was still puzzling over it. He'd get it to work eventually. Clothes were everywhere, and he took a deep, calming breath before grabbing what looked clean and throwing it on. His uncle was going to kill him. He was going to kill him, and Izuku was sure he knew how to hide a body, and Mom was going to cry and never know her baby brother was a murderer, and it was going to be awful. He is not going to kill you. He is soft. We are not soft. Shut up, Gremlin, I'm like a coffee jelly. Bitter but very squishy. Coffee jelly is bitter? Shut up. Izuku hissed and yanked on a shirt before he remembered that he should not be so harsh with his arms. A yelp escaped his lips and he took a deep breath, closing his eyes. This was fine. He was fine. Asuma wasn't going to kill him. Izuku, get out here. Asuma called and Izuku took another deep breath. This was fine. He was fine. His favorite and only uncle was not going to murder him in his sleep. Coming. He called and grabbed the doorknob before pausing, squeezing his eyes shut tight. This was a mess. Izuku, I know you're dressed. No. I'm coming. Taking another deep breath, Izuku opened the door and stepped out to meet his maker. Asuma was sitting on the couch, his back deliberately placed to Izuku. Izuku took in the dreads pulled back with a band, the posture that was too relaxed to be trusted, the way he had an arm slung over the back of the couch, casual, easy. This was not going to be an easy conversation. Katsuki had, admittedly, gone too far the second he slammed Izuku into the lockers, But Gremlin had only escalated the situation to an excessively high degree. And his reasoning was not going to be a reasoning Asuma was going to accept. But Izuku wasn't going to lie. His family didn't lie to each other. They always told the truth. Maybe they didn't talk about the truth after they told it, but they told the truth. And he was 13 with a god-level quirk. He understood why it was so important to tell the truth. Squaring his shoulders, he slunk into the living room and stood before his very sad uncle, head straight and eyes forward. He wasn't going to act like he was guilty. He wasn't guilty of anything but not telling them immediately. There were so many things out of his control in that situation. Sit, Asuma ordered, and Izuku sat down in the armchair, focusing on deep, even breaths. So, I left school early, Izuku started and then stopped. Tell me what happened, Asuma prompted, and Izuku grit his teeth. Kacchan was being a lot. Before class started. And Gremlin was practically screaming in my head. It was overwhelming, and after the past 5 weeks, I decided I needed a day to myself, he explained. So I told Kacchan I was sick and going home and didn't want to deal with him. He apparently told Sensei he was worried I'd collapse and followed me into the Genkin after Sensei told him to go after me. He got mad as usual, accused me of hiding stuff, got all hung up on me not caring that I'm quirkless, the normal stuff, and I was about to leave, but he slammed me into the locker. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but he started to lose control of his quirk and burned my jacket. I can show you that bit. It was clearly his quirk, and then Gremlin. He decided the best way to get Kacchan to leave me alone was to actually burn me for a response. Which was pretty stupid, and I reacted because, well, you saw how bad it was. It worked. Kacchan thought he did it, and I realized that if I corrected him it would lead to a really awkward conversation, so I let him think he burned me and told him if he stopped bothering me, I wouldn't tell anyone. And then I left, and it was all really overwhelming, and I was just tired and didn't know how to process what just happened, so I just went to the meadow and passed out for like the whole school day until you called me. I didn't mean to sleep so long, but Gremlin actually shut up for once, and it just happened. Like that. Asuma stared at Izuku for a long moment before letting out a low breath and rubbing his hand over his face. So Gremlin intervened in the worst possible way in a bullying situation, and you now have dirt on Katsuki because the ring burned the ever-loving F out of you, he surmised, and Izuku realized just how awful this whole ordeal looked. Yeah, he muttered and finally looked down. Everything had gotten so out of control with this med ring. With this whole quirk, really. And what about this deal? That he refuses to go back in the book, Izuku muttered. He says it's cold. That he refuses to go back. He understands I can't bring Sauron out to him. He just doesn't want to go back. And you believe him? No, Izuku answered honestly. I don't. But I do believe he does not want to go back in the book. I'm not sure if he actually believes that I can't bring Sauron to him, but he's seen evidence that I can't bring out living organisms, and he at least knows he's the exception to the rule. I think he at least understands that in this instance, I made him, but he's no longer calling Sauron master, and he's not following the rules of the Tolkien universe. I don't know what's going on, honestly. I almost want to snatch a small droid out of Star Wars to see if this is going to be a consistent thing, but I also don't think that's an entirely ethical thing to do. What do you mean he's not following the rules of the Tolkien universe? Asuma prompted, and Izuku twitched. He's just not. The ring seduces people with the promise of power. Even in his last moments in The Return of the King, he appealed to the kind-hearted Frodo's sense of possession, not his understanding that the ring was a sentient being. He's been with me for a month. He knows what I want. My thoughts are very clear to him. He knows he could easily sway me with the promise that, if I'm the most powerful person in the world, I won't have anyone try to take advantage of my quirk. He's not appealing to that. He's going outside of the canonical writings and showing a different approach to persuasion. He's showing a fear of death. He shouldn't be able to do that, but he's doing that, and I don't understand how. So whether or not he's lying, he's also showing the ability to evolve. Which means it's not a false sentience, but a real sentience. And while his thoughts are extremely disturbing, he hasn't actually done anything wrong in our universe yet, and never technically did anything wrong in the books, because he barely counted as sentient. He was more of an extension of Sauron's will beyond the grave. Here, he simply doesn't have access to Sauron's will, so even if I could put him back, which I can't, I don't think it's right to do so. What was he doing right now? Was he really arguing for the right to life of a ring? From a book? Izuku's quirk was so beyond his control right now. He needed help, but he also wanted to stand with his convictions. Asuma was openly staring at him now. His lips were parted in utter shock, and Izuku was pretty sure in his uncle's eyes, he had just grown a second head. Izuku was actually losing his mind, and the expression on Asuma's face wasn't helping matters in the slightest. Izuku, Asuma finally said, slowly, so slowly, you are the only person I know that could sit there and lay out a compelling argument that actually the one ring of power from Middle-earth deserves to live. Sorry? That I think Inko still has whiskey in the cabinet. Excuse me. And then Asuma simply stood up and walked to the kitchen in a daze, leaving Izuku sitting there trying to figure out just what his life had become. The ring hung in silence around his neck, and Izuku shrunk back into the armchair, tapping his fingers together anxiously as he wondered if he made the right decision. It just seemed wrong. The ring could not be affected by Sauron out here. Izuku knew that for a fact. He knew how his own quirk worked, thank you kindly. There was the initial programming from his first exit, but Gremlin was interacting with the world around him and learning other approaches. Did Izuku think the One Ring could be reformed? No, not really. But he also understood the ring was drawing on the power of his quirk, which was nowhere near the canonical power of Sauron. And Izuku? Izuku didn't know what that meant for him. For either of them. Jumping to just destroy the thing brought up a whole host of ethical questions, especially since the ring hadn't done anything wrong beyond, well, Izuku's chest. That was objectively wrong. But that also wasn't, like, death sentence wrong. That was 6 months in prison for assault wrong, and that really wouldn't mean anything to the ring. He waited for thousands of years for his master to return. And taking into account his reasoning for his actions, the prison sentence was more like 3 months. The cabinet opened and shut and there was a glug of whiskey being poured into a glass. Oh, he really wasn't kidding. Izuku felt like he was in trouble, or perhaps Asuma just didn't know what to do with him in general. Both were viable options. It could even be a mix of both. Am I grounded? He asked, and there was the sound of the glass being set back forcefully on the counter. No, Asuma said. That's your mom's job. You've grounded me before. Guess I need to specify. I don't want to ground you. Your mom may have other ideas. Okay. You were so confident 3 seconds ago. Yeah, then I realized I said something entirely nuts, and everyone in this room, including Gremlin, is aware of that. I do not think it was nuts. Shush, Izuku hissed and tuned into the noise of Asuma taking a long gulp of whiskey. I'm glad you're aware of that, kid. You honestly sounded just like Hisashi. Izuku turned around to peek over the back of the chair and watch Asuma polish off the glass before setting it forcefully down on the counter. The waste, if you ask me, Asuma continued, and Izuku's brows furrowed. What's a waste? It's a waste that you can't be open about it. Be a hero, like you want, Asuma supplied. I don't think I've ever met someone more suited for it. Then again, you could just take over the world too, and I don't think I'd complain. Please don't say that when I've got this thing around my neck. Asuma snorted and rubbed a hand over his face. Yeah, you are just like him, aren't you? He murmured and looked at Izuku with those sad eyes. I almost don't blame Inko for never moving on. The unsaid went there. How could anyone be a better father to Izuku? Or just as good? Sometimes, Izuku felt like he was living with Hisashi's ghost haunting this house. But you do realize, with your quirk doing this weird sheet, I'm gonna have to put my foot down, Asuma continued, and Izuku stiffened. What? Based on what you've said, and the fact that you are not acting like the people that were corrupted in the books at all, and I would know, I'm pretty sure I've memorized the DMN things in the past 5 weeks, this means your quirk is a lot more powerful than we can understand. Which means I have to fight with Inko. And maybe win this time. You two need to be living with me. That I don't think a grown woman with a child wants to live with her kid brother, Izuku said hesitantly, and Asuma wiped his hand over his face. I'm not thrilled either, Izuku. I actually like my bachelor life and living it up as the fun and reasonably responsible gay uncle. But this isn't going to fly. You may have the literal perfect getaway at all times, but Inko doesn't, and you can't be with her all the time to yank her into the meadow. Nor is that your job. You two need to be living with a pro hero. Uncle. I'm serious, Izuku. Your quirk should be constrained by the rules of the books you draw from. But you pulled something sentient out, and it's evolving. That's dangerous. I don't like that. I don't know what it means. You've never even had quirk counseling. I'm an accredited quirk counselor, and this is going to take a while to figure out. You gave me quirk counseling. Izuku protested. That was before you pulled the one ring of power out of the Fing Hobbit because you were trying to get Sting, Izuku. That was also before something reacted to your presence before you gave it life. For all we know, you could be awakening the books you're reaching into. I need you to give me one of the charged books to take to scan at UA. But Mom, they won't know it was you. I'll cite minor confidentiality. But we need to figure this out. Izuku was silent, twitching in discomfort as he looked around the apartment he'd been brought home from the hospital in. This was his home, and his uncle wanted him to move into that snazzy penthouse with all those windows and open floor plans and lack of life? Sure, he already had a room there, and so did Mom, but Izuku, Asuma said softly, and Izuku was reminded of that time his mom confidentially told him the reason Snipe wore his mask was because he had too much of an honest face. Izuku wished his face wasn't so honest, because right now, Asuma almost looked heartbroken. I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. That's what Mom said when his quirk came in, when they figured out what it was and what he could do. Other kids got to celebrate their quirks. Izuku had to hide it. Zoo, Asuma said again, this time carefully approaching him. Izuku didn't want to know what his face looked like. Zoo, I really am sorry. Is it really so bad? Izuku asked quietly. He didn't need to provide context. Uncle Asuma knew. Was it really so bad to have this quirk? His uncle didn't answer and Izuku swallowed harshly. Going to go get you that book? He mumbled, and then he slipped away into his meadow. Remember, Izuku, we're going to the aquarium after school, so don't go missing, okay? Mom pressed a kiss to the crown of Izuku's head and ruffled his curls, and Izuku looked up from his breakfast. I know, he replied cheerfully as Asuma passed behind him, giving his hair a quick ruffle. Happy birthday, Zoo, he said as he grabbed the to-go mug of coffee Mom had brewed for him. Thanks, Ko. Doesn't your staff meeting start in 5 minutes? Mom asked as she glanced at the calendar in alarm. Yes, but Namuri is always late and we have to wait for her. Anyways, it's fine, Asuma replied. Izuku, don't forget your key again. It really doesn't matter if I have my key or not, Izuku pointed out diplomatically. I'd prefer you just remember your key instead of using your quirk to get out of the responsibility every 14-year-old has, Asuma replied as he grabbed his motorcycle keys. Bye, slugger. See ya, Ko. He has a point, Izuku, Mom added and dangled Izuku's keys in front of him. Stop leaving them. Izuku responded and stuffed the last of his breakfast into his face. Snatching the key from his mom, he picked up his bag and gave her a wave goodbye as Asuma opened the front door. You're going to be late, let me give you a ride, Asuma said and Mom cleared her throat. You're already late. Izuku has 30 minutes before the first bell, she cut in. Izuku, baby, go. And take the train. Izuku managed to swallow down the last of the rice. See you after school. Love you. Mom called and Asuma swung the door shut with a click. Izuku fixed the book bag so it was slung across his chest and tilted his head at Asuma, fixing him. With the legendary puppy dog eyes. You don't have to do that, Asuma said with a laugh. I'm not breaking my month-long streak of being 30 minutes late on the dot. I'll ruin my bet with Nizu. Come on. Yes, Izuku hissed as they headed for the elevator. Katsuki still not talking to you? Asuma asked. The filth will not look at us. Yes, Izuku said and directed a severe glance down at his chest. He still doesn't like him? Asuma asked with no small degree of amusement. Would you? Izuku shot back and Asuma rolled his eyes. I haven't seen the kid since he was 5, how can I give an assessment? Fair but still. Is he still aiming for UA? Yeah, but it's fine, Izuku said with a shrug. I'm just going for Gen Ed, he's not going to even see me. Yeah, but I'll be stuck teaching him, Asuma groused as the elevator doors dinged open. He only got physical with you once, right? There was a warning tone in the question. The sort of you'd better not lie warning. Izuku raised his eyebrows in response as they stepped in and Asuma hit the button for the ground floor. If I didn't think he had the potential to be a hero, I'd tell you, he replied. I hate his guts, but I'm not going to completely write off all of that home stuff. It doesn't help that every teacher just encourages and enables him. The only person he's got who can possibly teach him to be nice to people is his dad, and the whole situation was infuriating for Asuma. There was no proof of Mitsuki getting physical, Masaru wouldn't file a report, probably because she could destroy his career and then Katsuki really wouldn't have anyone to support him or at least act as a buffer, and heroes could only intervene when things got physical. Emotional and mental abuse fell under child services, and child services were of the opinion that heavy hands and harsh words were necessary with volatile quirks. The whole situation was mired in bureaucracy, and it didn't help that Mitsuki was one of the most popular supermodels in Japan. Izuku still detested Kacchan. But he also understood that he was a wreck and had no idea what affection actually looked like beyond his dad, and to him, his dad was little more than a verbal punching bag, and Kacchan wasn't going to get that it was his own form of sacrifice. Mom had ended her friendship with Mitsuki when the boys were 6 because of Mitsuki's behavior, and because Kacchan was starting to follow in her lead when it came to Izuku. The whole situation was a mess, and Izuku was not about to go on some self-sacrificing rampage to fix it. If you say so, kid, Asuma finally said, and the dubiousness of his tone was painfully clear. I do say so, Izuku said firmly. Do not defend the filth, Gremlin hissed, and Izuku in a breath through his teeth. 2 months now of this DMN thing whispering in his ear, and he still hadn't learned to mind his business. If you wish me to mind my business, then your business should not be so loud. Okay, point for Gremlin, but Izuku was still running out of patience with his constant running commentary. You've got the Gremlin face, Asuma commented. Gremlin is constantly talking, so that's going to be a regular fixture. Oh, so he thinks you're too forgiving too. I'm not too forgiving. I'm objective. You can't just look at someone like Kacchan and judge him without judging everyone around him. Izuku protested. He's a piece of shit, but so is Endeavor, and no one would say Endeavor isn't an effective hero. I'd say he's not effective, Asuma grumbled as the doors opened. Numbers say otherwise. You don't get to number 2 if you aren't effective. Didn't say he was a good hero. He's effective, though, Izuku said with a shrug as Asuma waved at the doorman. So you think Katsuki can be an effective hero? I think he's 14 and UA could actually help him because the teachers there wouldn't encourage him to be an a-hole, Izuku replied with a shrug. If he goes too far, I'll tell you. You'd better, Asuma said threateningly. I will. You act like I'm a total lost cause. Izuku complained. I think you act tough, but you're a massive romantic that's read too many books with unrealistic redemption arcs, Asuma corrected. That wounds me, Izuku said as they pushed their way out of the lobby and made their way to the garage. It should. Books are my life, uncle. Literally. And you of all people should know how effective fiction is at implanting an idea in your brain, Asuma pointed out, and Gremlin chuckled deep in Izuku's subconscious. Okay, that was low, Izuku sniffed. I'm just making an effective argument, Zu. It's my birthday. You shouldn't be harassing me like this. It's your birthday, which means I should be imparting wisdom. This isn't wisdom. This is harassment. Ah, only a 14-year-old would say that. How many times are you going to find a way to work my age into your sentences? At least 14 times. Izuku groaned from the bottom of his soul as they reached Asuma's motorcycle and his uncle handed him his helmet. There's more where that came from, squirt, Asuma said as Izuku pulled on the helmet. I really hope not, Izuku mumbled, and Asuma laughed and swung astride the bike. Hop on, Asuma said, and Izuku climbed on behind him as Asuma kicked up the stand. Just don't embarrass me at the aquarium, please? Izuku begged. I make no promises. Did you invite any of those Twitter friends, by the way? Asuma asked, pausing for Izuku's reply with the key in the ignition. No, I told you that'd be weird, Izuku replied. Most of them are nowhere near Mizutafu, anyways. And we're not really friends. They don't even know I'm quirkless. It'll get better, Zoo, Asuma murmured, because no matter what anyone said, Snipe was probably the softest hero out there. Izuku just sighed and pressed his helmet to Asuma's back. His uncle waited for a reply that wouldn't come, and then he started up the bike. It was difficult to talk on a roaring motorcycle. The 10-minute ride passed in silence, with Izuku clinging to Asuma's waist. Despite the heavy loneliness, he still did enjoy it every time Asuma let him ride along. Had Izuku not had the ability to teleport anywhere he chose, he probably would want a motorcycle himself. But it wasn't like he could use it, anyways, even if people did know about it, considering he wasn't in the running for heroics and public quirk usage wasn't exactly legal. Maybe when he turned 18 he'd aim for bullying Asuma into helping him get a license. Eventually, they pulled up to Aldra, and Izuku clung to his uncle for a second longer than necessary. He didn't want to go in. No one remembered his birthday, not even Kacchan, so Izuku wouldn't be targeted for that today, but that didn't mean he wanted to deal with them today. He wanted a good birthday. Asuma cut the engine and waited patiently for Izuku to release him. I can just take you to work today, he murmured. My co-workers want to meet you. Yes. The quirkless charity case. Living with a pro-hero uncle because his mother suspected the bullying was getting worse and he wouldn't talk about it. That was the cover story, anyways. It wasn't like they could blame it on finances. Mom was the head nurse of the pediatric unit at the hospital. She had plenty of money, and if they used that as an excuse, it would just look pitiful. The answer was clear, so they owned up to it. It's okay, Izuku murmured and let go of him, peeling off the helmet and stuffing it back in the saddlebag. Maybe just show up in your suit next time? The cloak would slap you around, squirt, Asuma replied with a sad smile. But I can probably come in the rest. Thanks, Izuku mumbled and turned to look at the tall, imposing walls. I can handle it. Asuma followed his gaze and sighed quietly. Hostility is easier than pity, huh? Izuku didn't have to reply. Asuma knew. I'll see you after school, Asuma said softly. Love you, Izuku said and squared his shoulders. Oh, and be careful coming home, Asuma added. There's some kind of freak transformation quirk guy running rampant. He can take over bodies, so make sure you stay in populated areas, alright. You got it, Izuku said with a half smile. No back alleys for me. Good. See you. Izuku raised a hand to wave him off, and the motorcycle rumbled back to life. Asuma peeled off, and Izuku squared his shoulders. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Today was going to be just fine. No baiting Kacchan, no mouthing off. If the teacher called on him for once, he'd answer. His homework was all accounted for, everything was in order. One more year of this. One more year, and then he was a shoo-in for Gen Ed, and he could leave all of this behind him. Oh, Midoriya wanted to go to UA, too, right? You could hear a pin drop. Izuku stared at the teacher with all the silent burning rage he had, vowing that one day he would end this man's career. Do we eat him? Gremlin always had the worst timing, because right now, Izuku could look at that man and see a juicy steak to rival the finest wagyu. If he was more naive, he might have conveniently forgotten, or simply not noticed that almost amused gleam in his eye as Kacchan slowly turned back to look at Izuku. If he was more meek, more quiet, perhaps the class would have erupted into laughter at the teacher's seemingly innocuous statement. If he was anyone but himself, perhaps he wouldn't have the look of pure, cold, burning hatred on his face. Because that teacher knew it was his birthday. It was right there on the sheet in front of him. Because all day, Izuku had flown under the radar, and from that single comment, everything had gone to hell, and the teacher knew it. Deku wants to go to you, Kacchan repeated, and Izuku turned his steely gaze on him. Yes. For Gen Ed, he said calmly. I aced all the practice exams. My uncle sent me all the material. Their eyes met, and Izuku didn't flinch under that burning rage. You're not going to UA? Kacchan spat. I'm the only kid in this school making it in. The only kid in this school making it into heroics, Izuku corrected. No one cares about Gen Ed, remember? Kacchan stared at him for a long moment, and the teacher cleared his throat. Izuku honestly could not see straight through the rage. The whispers were breaking out all across the classroom. Cold, unfriendly Midoriya going to UA? How did his uncle get him study material? The quirkless student aiming for a spot at the greatest school? You're quirkless, remember? Kacchan said like it was a taunt. Izuku just kept staring. We will feast on his flesh, Gremlin promised, and Izuku privately thought he'd rather taste the bone marrow of the teacher. The ring grumbled and warmed against his chest, satiated with the level of rage, but not satisfying with how forgiving Izuku was, as if this qualified as such. You won't do anything, Gremlin whispered, and Izuku just quietly thought he wouldn't have to. Things were going to come to this school, after Izuku was already gone. He was sure of it. Vengeance should be yours, Gremlin huffed, as if he was actually offended by Izuku not burning the school to the ground himself. And while it was a nice thought, Izuku still had to have a good record to get into UA, and he couldn't get away with the sort of things Kacchan could. The teacher cleared his throat again and Kacchan scoffed before turning aside. Izuku kept his eyes firmly locked on the back of his neck, long enough to make him squirm, before he turned his burning gaze onto the teacher. He wasn't intimidated, not in the slightest. Instead, he smiled at Izuku, as if he was an angry kitten yowling for milk, and Izuku just smiled back. For a moment, just a moment, the teacher saw the same daggers Izuku felt in his mouth. Really, it was partially Gremlin's fault that it felt so satisfying when he averted his eyes. The class was subdued by the sudden tension in the room. All day, glances were spared towards Izuku, and he could almost feel their thoughts and worries that he was going to snap. He didn't. He sat through class, calmly, and waited a good hour to excuse himself to go to the bathroom. Walking as fluidly as ever, he waltzed out of the room and holed himself up in the men's room to pull out his phone and open the family group chat. Izuku, I'd rather stay home today. He wanted to leave, but the crushing weight of how impossible everything was kept him leaning against the stall wall, staring down at his phone as the rage began to ebb away in return for a bone-aching sorrow that overtook his whole vision, forcing him to focus on nothing but waiting for 3 dots from someone, anyone, to answer him. To know he was there. You could rule them, Gremlin whispered, like it was a promise, and Izuku really needed to break that habit of his. A soft sigh slipped out of his mouth. There'd be no point, Grem, he murmured. You know what I want. There was a scoff in response, deep in the back of his mind, and the ring warmed ever so slightly. I almost like to remind you. No you don't, Izuku replied as the ghost of a smile twitched at his lips. You just thought it was worth a shot. I am what I am. And so am I. 3 dots. Mom was typing. Inko, what happened? Izuku swallowed down the pain and considered lying, if only for a moment, but instead he dropped his head and chose to prolong the inevitable. Izuku, can we talk about it when I get home? I'm hiding in the bathroom right now and it's complicated. Inko, I love you. Izuku, love you more. Inko, not possible. Izuku swallowed down the lump in his throat and managed a one smile his mother couldn't see. He could leave. He could step into the meadow right now and go home. DM his textbooks, DM his shoes, he could be home right now, in his messy bedroom with his piles of books, with easy access to Mom's tea cabinet and the beat-up whistling tea kettle that lived on the stove. He could curl up in the living room in his pajamas with a new book to read and forget everything about today, and maybe, just maybe, he would even feel up to his trip to the aquarium. You could, Gremlin whispered, but if you want to be a hero, why would you run away? A hero could punch the villains in the face and call it a day, Izuku whispered. Is it really so simple, or are you just young? Gremlin mused, and tears pricked at Izuku's eyes. He wanted to be young. He wanted to be stupidly naive and full of hope and joy and wonder and believe this was just another mountain to climb. He wanted to be the star of a shounen anime, fight through with grit and sheer optimism, but at the end of the day, he was a solitary boy, ostracized by classmates and bullied by his teachers. At the end of the day, he was too grown, and he just knew far too much. Too much hardship, too much about consequences, too much power, and too much about the fall that comes to everyone eventually. Swallowing down the pain, Izuku slipped his phone back into his pocket and pulled open the stall door. It was 3 hours. 3 hours, and he could go home. He walked back to class in a daze. The world was a bit hazy around him, and he wondered just why he was surprised every time. He should know better by now. If his classmates weren't going to ruin a day, his teacher would most certainly take his birthday into account as the day to try to crush him. But as he neared the door, he took into account the fact that he could not live his life in a haze to escape everything. One more year. That was all he needed to escape. Asuma had already been promised to him as a homeroom teacher. Stuff like this wouldn't happen at UA. He would have 3 good years, and he could look forward to those 3 good years before he resigned himself to a lifetime of being the quirkless, average, underpaid, undervalued, underappreciated white-collar worker. Asuma would pay for his college, and Izuku would graduate as a lawyer, struggle to find work, but eventually find a place at some civil rights firm as a diversity hire, and he'd live comfortably in obscurity, never to raise above his station, content to listen to quirked advocates passionately preach for his rights in a space he would never be allowed in. At least he'd always have the meadow. And, unfortunately, Gremlin. But for now, he'd straighten his head, set his jaw, swallow down that pervasive lump, and go to class. Hey, Deku! Kacchan, always with the impeccable timing. Izuku sighed over his spilt school bag, turned out by his classmates and left in a mess on the floor. He was trying to get out of here fast, but after that announcement, he couldn't get away with anything. His eyes drifted up to Kacchan and his 2 buddies standing there. For some reason, he couldn't be bothered to remember what their names were. They used to play together, but over the years they had turned into faceless goons, looming behind Kacchan at any given opportunity, as if that would give them flashier quirks. He wasn't even sure if Kacchan even liked them nowadays. Maybe they just stroked his ego. Yes. He asked with a sigh as he grabbed the last textbook and shoved it into his bag. Where do you get off, acting like you're something, huh? Kacchan asked as he advanced on Izuku. Izuku stood up and stared at Kacchan with dead eyes before holding up his hand. Before you get on your tirade, I'm first going to state that it's my birthday, not that you'd remember, and I have to get home to Mom. You know, the one woman in your life that ever acted like a decent human being to you before your mother drove her off like she's going to drive you off eventually. B. I'm going to need you to consider for just one moment that perhaps, if you were born with just a slightly less flashy and awesome quirk, perhaps other people would care to hear your opinion on them about as much as I do, which is about 0 right now. C. You have one reason and one reason alone to actually approach me with the intent to scare me off from my UA, and that reason is that you actually think I can get in, otherwise you wouldn't bother with it in the slightest, so maybe you need to re-examine your bias against people parading around with the quirkless label, preferably far away from me, so I don't have to act as your verbal punching bag until you get a FING therapist, because I am so far beyond caring about your opinion it isn't even funny. Kacchan stared at Izuku for a long, long moment, and Izuku stared back, head tilted forward, lips slightly parted, just daring him to say something. When he determined the pause was sufficiently long enough, he looked between the 2 idiots behind Kacchan and tilted his head only just. Oh, you too. No one's going to care who you hung out with in middle school. He's not going to give a F about you once he's in you. He doesn't even like you, and quite frankly, I wouldn't either. You have the presence of 2 extras in a B-rated gangster movie who get gunned down outside a speakeasy in the first 15 minutes of the movie. You should work on getting personalities before someone tries to hand you a script. I've had a pretty shit day, so I'm leaving now. Deliberately pushing past the 3 of them, Izuku marched for the door, but a hand caught on the strap of his book bag and yanked him back. In an instant, Izuku was face to face with Kacchan, who was staring down at him with some emotion Izuku could not read. You know, Izuku, Kacchan said quietly, and Izuku's eyebrows went up as he blinked multiple times, it's kind of a FING waste you don't give a shit about heroics. He released him and Izuku took a step back. A second, the two of them stared each other down, and then Izuku deliberately turned on his heel and walked out the door. In the dark recesses of Izuku's mind, Gremlin laughed maniacally, and Izuku couldn't help but agree. In hindsight, it really was not Izuku's fault he forgot his uncle's warning. He had a rough day, and the last thing he was thinking about was one villain running about. The first thing he was thinking about was avoiding crowds, because not even Kacchan's confusing comment could put him back in a good mood. In fact, it was only serving to put him in a worse mood. Izuku had been telling him off for years. Ever since his quirk came in really. They had a toxic relationship. Kacchan knew him so well back then. He knew when Izuku was lying to him, and he knew an abrupt change in personality meant more than their mothers falling out and his father going missing. In a way, Izuku almost needed him to nettle him, because Izuku could let that biting tongue simmering under the surface come up. He knew if he cowered before Kacchan the boy would only get angrier and get violent, so standing up to him and lashing out was just about the only thing that kept him from getting violent. Except that one time. Izuku wasn't sure what was going on with that time Gremlin burnt the hell out of him. Kacchan had stayed away, at least, but it felt wrong. And Izuku knew enough to know that was toxic. At least Kacchan actually interacted with Izuku. No one else did. Sure, there were the off-bullying instances, but those were detached. People messing with his stuff, mostly when his back was turned. It wasn't really in person, and gods, Izuku needed actual friends, and he needed them badly. This was actually pathetic. It really was a testament to just how tired and done with everything he was right now that even while in the clutches of a quite frankly disgusting quirk, he was thinking about this, and his general mood was simply, guess I'll die. Gremlin, however, did not agree with that assessment. Get him off, take us to Meadow, what are you doing, stupid boy? Izuku was actually drowning, and instead of panicking, he was just mad. His body was struggling as it should, but his brain was entirely blank as he kicked and thrashed and pulled at the gunk around his mouth. Yes, you will be a great meat sack, just for a little bit, I promise it won't hurt, the man hissed in Izuku's ear as he tried to crawl down his throat. Fuck K. Izuku coughed through a choke, because this felt beyond violating. He was crawling up Izuku's orifices, Gremlin was screeching that he didn't want his favorite meat stick, and when had that happened, to be possessed by a creep, Izuku was dying, everything was chaos. Use me. Gremlin hissed. Persuade him. Technically, Izuku could step into the meadow, but on the off chance he survived and the sludge survived, there would be someone outside of Mom and Asuma who knew he was actually possessing a quirk, and that was simply a recipe for disaster. Gasping and clawing at the gunk in his mouth, he struggled and kicked and fought as his brain whirred for options. I need to talk to persuade him, idiot, was the only thing Izuku could think, and Gremlin just let out an ear-piercing screech. I promised, but I am sorry, Gremlin apologized. Wait, no, damn it, and white-hot, blazing heat exploding across his flesh, and the oil, sludge, tar, whatever, recoiled from his chest, giving Izuku just enough space to get some leverage to rip at the sludge crawling into his throat so he could breathe and scream at the top of his lungs, partially out of fear, primarily out of burning pain exploding across his chest, far more severe this time. I am here. This was a nightmare. The manhole cover exploded, and Izuku's eyes widened at the compromising position he was caught in. Gremlin immediately cooled, hissing apologies as the air ripped itself to shreds around Izuku, flinging him to the side and forcing him to smack into the wall, hard, his head colliding with the brick and sending stars dancing across his vision. Wet blood seeped into his curls, and he gasped, hacking out the sludge as the man screeched in pain. Yellow hair, rising into the sky, khaki pants, a white shirt. Izuku would know that voice anywhere. Once upon a time, he wanted to be that voice. His head was ringing, and Gremlin wasn't making things any easier, alternating between whispering assurances and pleading for Izuku to tear the creature that was being scooped into soda bottles? Limb from limb. His hair soaked up the blood and he blinked, hard, his entire body on fire. Are you all right, young man? All Might, it was if in All Might, boomed, and Izuku struggled to his knees, coughing and hacking and spitting out sludge. He rasped and hacked even harder as a massive hand patted his back in some farce of comfort. Don't like him, he's death, he's putting death on you, get away from him, Gremlin hissed as Izuku spat out sludge and what was possibly blood. Young man, All Might repeated, and Izuku held one finger up as he spat out the last of the sludge and took in a big, rattling breath. Everything hurt. His chest was on fire, and were he not covered in sludge, he would reek of burned flesh. Young man, are you all right? No, Izuku choked out as he sat back, his head still swimming. Young man, what is wrong? Izuku's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets and he sat back, taking a deep breath as he stared at a genuinely lost and perplexed All Might in disbelief. Was the icon of his childhood a fing himbo? Apparently. Actually had no clue what to do with this development. Wait, he gasped as All Might straightened up and offered a hand, a smile plastered across his face. Do you need medical attention? All Might asked as if he was reciting from a script, and Izuku stared at him, fresh from a near drowning, bleeding from the back of his head from All Might's smash, sludge dripping from his lips. I must take this escaped convict to the police station. You put him in soda bottles? Izuku asked, feeling the energy of never meet your heroes very strongly. Yes. It was a very messy job, but it had to do. All Might boomed, and Izuku just kept staring at him. Oh. Well, I am off. Be sure to call your parents, young man. You know, Izuku, it's kind of a fing waste you don't give a shit about heroics. All Might tensed, and some wild instinct prompted Izuku to lash out and grab his leg just as he took off. In an instant, it was chaos. Gremlin was just a poor, lost, screeching entity, warning imminent demise in Izuku's brain. Izuku was flying, All Might was panicking, shouting to him to let go. Izuku was pretty sure he replied with he would fall to his death, which was ridiculous. He could just warp away to the meadow, but it sounded right, everyone was screaming, and then they were on a rooftop. Young man, I understand being a fan, but this is far too moo. If you couldn't use your quirk, would you still be a hero? Izuku gasped, panting for air as he knelt on hands and knees before All Might who was either careless or an idiot or just didn't care, but he was All Might and he was here, and that was what mattered. Silence passed. Izuku's eyes were on the ground beneath him, and for a moment he couldn't differentiate between Gremlin's discontented noises and a hiss of steam. Slowly he lifted his eyes, and there was All Might. Or not All Might. Was not him? I told you. He is death. He is marked, Gremlin hissed, and Izuku stared in horror as the hero of his dreams slowly deflated before him. Never meet your heroes. That you're you, he said, before he could stop himself, because it was the only thing that made sense. All Might was before him, and he was emaciated. That I was expecting you to scream, All Might muttered, and Izuku stared at him. The first rule of the best, Izuku breathed. You sacrifice too much. You're you. He was a willowy twig of a man, wizened, bent over, clearly in pain. Gremlin whispered that he was drowning in it, and Izuku suddenly understood why he was in such a hurry to get away. No one could know about this. What was it you asked? All Might asked, and gone was the heartening boom that filled the lonely silences when Izuku still believed. If I couldn't use my quirk, would I still be a hero? Izuku stared at him and the realization of the world crashed in on him. You'd use it anyways, he said, and All Might met his eyes. A long silence passed between them, and Izuku slowly climbed to his feet to face the scarecrow. I would not recommend it, All Might croaked, and he sounded so tired. Izuku stared at him. And stared. And stared. Had a fight, some years ago. And then he lifted his shirt, slowly, to show a patchwork of horrific scars, like a starburst, across his torso. I lost a lung. Stomach. The surgeries left me as such. I only have a few hours a day as a hero before I become this. Don't think my quirk did this to me. I did. There's a moment when you meet your heroes, or who were once your heroes. It was silent, but so loud, like waves lapping at a beach. If Izuku opened his mouth, he could taste the salt on his tongue. His face was wrinkled, sunken, haggard. His shoulders were sloped in, as if even the weight of his head was too much to carry. The bunny ears that lit up a child's imagination were sloping, falling into decay, and even his hair lacked luster or sheen, screaming of a deficient diet. "You were buying soda," Izuku said, because he couldn't think of anything else to say, and All Might almost laughed. "That's the first thing you'd think to say? Small pleasures, my boy. Small pleasures are all we have." It was something uniquely heartbreaking, looking at him. "You know, Izuku, it's kind of a waste that you don't give a shit about heroics." Somehow, Izuku suddenly very much gave a shit about heroics. "Don't you have anyone to tell you to stop?" he asked, because his mouth was so far ahead of his brain it was in another galaxy, and All Might stared at him. His eyes were black and dull, but when Izuku looked at him, all he saw was a tragedy no one cared to stop. "And who will be me if I do?" All Might asked by way of an answer, and Izuku swallowed. "That would be Kacchan." "He's not ready yet," Izuku said, and the answer surprised him. All Might looked at him like he was a puzzle he couldn't figure out, and Izuku realized how sad his statement sounded, the loneliness it rang with, the way Izuku said it like it was a tragedy in the making. This was what it meant to be the best. This is a secret," All Might said, and Izuku swallowed hard. "We all have our secrets," he said quietly, and he was pretty sure the head injury had taken every ounce of common sense he had, because he couldn't stop talking. "I do. Everyone thinks I'm quirkless. I'm registered as quirkless. But I'm not. Because my dad, he had to leave, and his quirk was nowhere near as powerful as mine, but it was dangerous enough. I don't know if he's even alive, or in the Bahamas, or worse. So, I get it. I won't tell, and we're even." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because for his whole life, there were 3 people that knew what he could do, and he was one of them. Not even his own father knew. Maybe because it was too much to bear for a 14-year-old. Maybe because his only real friend was a sentient ring ripped from the pages of a book. Maybe because he needed to say it out loud, where someone could hear. Where someone couldn't tell anyone because he had dirt on him, because he'd trapped him, because deep down, Izuku was a terrible person, but also a child in pain on multiple levels. "That I would remind you that that's illegal, but I'm not much better," All Might finally said, and his eyes were so full of pain Izuku didn't even know what to do, because it was a dead pain. "That I'm sorry." "So am I," Izuku breathed because he felt like he could cry right now. "That I need to deliver this man to the police station," All Might said, not unkindly. "May I know your name?" "No," Izuku said and swallowed hard. "It's better if you don't." "Of course." And then, just like waves breaking on the shore, All Might was going to the door and walking away. And Izuku had a secret he could never tell his mother, because for once, it didn't belong to him. Growing up was the singularly worst experience of his life. "We are friends?" Gremlin asked hesitantly as the door swung shut, and Izuku just stared out at the skyline. "Guess you're as close as it gets," he replied, feeling like he didn't truly exist in this world anymore. And then his eyes drifted down. Right to bright orange explosions. The bottles. Kacchan. Using his quirk in broad daylight was a big no-no, so Izuku at least had the sense to exit out of the nearest alley, breaking into a running sprint as the explosions grew louder and louder. His breath was falling out of him in a gasp, his burnt flesh was tearing at him, his head was still bleeding, he felt like he could faint at any second, but there was no quirk like Kacchan's. "You know, Izuku, it's a FING waste that you don't give a shit about heroics. Quirkless." He didn't say, "It's a FING waste that you're quirkless." He said, "Don't give a shit about heroics." That's what he said, and gods, Izuku was a hot mess for believing him for a one-off encounter. He was a FNG wreck. This was utterly pathetic, but the kid he'd seen in class with him every day since he was 4 years old was drowning and battling it out with the very thing that nearly killed Izuku, and Kacchan didn't have the one ring of power to help him. Admittedly, Gremlin was more like a knockoff, and severely lacking in the power aspect of his name, but he was still the One Ring, and he managed to help without a wielder even allowing him to. Gods, Izuku's chest was burning. "I'm not a knockoff." "You really are," Izuku coughed out as he slid around the corner to find a crowd of people. Why were so many people crowding? Kacchan was dying. Heroes were handling it, right? Izuku pushed through the crowd, panting heavily, and there was a TV crew, apparently live broadcasting the death of a child on national television. Very sweet of them. This was why Izuku got so disillusioned with heroics to begin with. There were heroes. Izuku didn't recognize any of them. There was some guy with a water hose, some guy with ridiculous arms. He couldn't see the rest of them because Kacchan was right there in the center of the sludge villain, screeching up a storm and letting off blast after blast as the villain tried to crawl his way into his mouth. Izuku pulled to an abrupt stop, panting hard and watching in horror as Kacchan thrashed about wildly, trying to find purchase in its slimy grip. All of our quirks are useless. We have to wait for someone to come. Someone called. Izuku didn't even pay attention to who it was, because what did they mean, their quirks were useless? He admittedly had given up on his whole obsessive quirk studies, but the tree guy could at least pull Kacchan out from a distance, or at least clear out his airway. And then their eyes met. Izuku watched in horror at the blanket terror on Kacchan's face, the way his eyes flickered, because he didn't want to die. He never wanted to die, not like this. Don't save the filth, Gremlin spat. You promised Mother. If you couldn't use your quirk, would you still be a hero? Izuku had seen too much tragedy today. He saw it in All Might, and he saw it in Kacchan, and he saw it in himself. Because he knew the answer. The answer was that a hero would use it anyways, because who cares about fear when people were dying and you could stop it? Who could care? Izuku couldn't. And the heroes were doing nothing. It was a white haze. Izuku didn't even know what he was doing, but in a second he was launching himself over the barricade as someone screamed at him to stop. He didn't even have his book bag. He had nothing. Nothing but himself, but as himself, he could do something. The scent of wildflowers filled his nostrils. He needed to get in close. Focusing on where he wanted to go, he stepped into the crunch of grass and flowers, and stepped out, inches away from fiery booms as Kacchan watched with eyes glistening with hope and unadulterated rage. The scent of rampant sludge filled his nostrils, and he breathed an apology to his mother, one hand reaching out for Kacchan. His hand, mid-explosion, was the closest thing, and Izuku tore through the white-hot explosion that seared the flesh of his palm, slapping down into the hand shining with nitroglycerin, and he pulled. In an instant, both boys disappeared. Kacchan was in the meadow for less than a second, not even long enough to catch sight of the bookshelves, and then Izuku was yanking him out, far away from the sludge villain, on the other side of the alley as they collapsed in a heap, Kacchan retching and heaving up pitch-black, oily tar as the scent of wildflowers was chased away on the wind. Kacchan, Izuku gasped. Cough it all up, Detroit smash. All Might bellowed, just as Izuku's phone started ringing like crazy, because of course his uncle would know immediately, and an explosion of sludge rocked the world. Strong arms swept both boys up, shielding them from the shockwave as water abruptly began to rain down, and wet blood finally made it down the back of Izuku's neck, staining the white collar of his shirt, and he realized then that he was deeply, deeply in trouble. His phone was still ringing and All Might gingerly released him, setting him down on the ground, and Izuku patted around in his pockets to find the vibrating phone. Izuku, what the foo? Sorry, Izuku said as he accepted the call from Asuma. I'm sorry, Uncle Ipa. Izuku, Asuma cut in. Move away from everyone else right now. Okay, Izuku coughed and scrambled back as his heart hammered in his chest because Dad had gone away for this. He was going to lose his mom, he was going to lose his uncle, he was going to lose everyone. It was all over. Okay, I'm sorry, I panicked. I'm so sorry. Do I have to Izuku, it's very important that you do not speak right now, Asuma said. Do you understand me? No. Speak. Okay. Okay. Do you have Gremlin? Gremlin, silent, thrummed against his chest, and Izuku nodded, eyes wide and panicking, before he realized Asuma couldn't see that. Maybe All Might was blocking the view of the cameras and staring down at him with intent. Yes, he's here. Kacchan started crawling to him, red-faced, and said, and All Might immediately reached for him, making a show of helping him up and fussing over him, and Kacchan was torn between starstruck and said and confused. We'll talk about why the hell All Might is covering for you later. The man can't act for shit, but right now I need you to focus on my voice. You are quirkless. You do not speak to any pros, any reporters, until I get there. Understood? I understand, Izuku rasped. Good. We're going to spin this as a stress manifestation that we knew could have happened. Do you understand? You will not be in trouble for a stress manifestation. You are not clinically quirkless. On paper, it's invisible or latent. That is our story. Right now, you are a traumatized quirkless child whose quirk just manifested, and your Uncle Snipe is going to come clear everything up. Izuku, are you bleeding? I ran into him earlier, the villain, but gremlin. I'm burned again, but it got him off for a second so I could breathe before All Might. Stop talking. We'll talk about this later. I need to leave now. You're 5 minutes away. This is a stress manifestation. You are quirkless. Got it? I'm hanging up now. The line went dead, and Izuku felt his entire life crashing in on him as Kacchan looked between him and All Might wildly, trying to piece together what the hell just happened. Shaking, he drew his knees to his chin as ambulances pulled up, sirens wailing. Hey kid. It was the one with the arms, approaching him in a seemingly terrible mood. The hell did you think you were doing? Izuku was shaking. His breath was coming into gasps, and Kacchan stared at him hard for a moment, brows furrowed because out of everyone, the only people that knew him better were his mom, uncle, and his FNG ring, and he knew something was wildly off. Izuku just having his quirk coming in would not be reacting like this. He saw Izuku's face. That blatant determination, that decision to use his quirk, and the panic that only kicked in afterwards. Hey, why the hell are you yelling at him? He shouted at the guy as Izuku swallowed hard. He needed to stop shaking. He just ruined everything. Everything his mom had fought for he had just thrown away because it had seemed like a good idea at the time. All Might had been right there, but All Might's time was up. Izuku had seen him deflate right in front of him. Looking around, he suddenly realized Kacchan was making a scene, all the cameras were on him, and All Might was gone. He just used his quirk on purpose to fight a villain, that's why I'm yelling at him. So was I. Kacchan protested. Yell at me, not him. He's never even. He cut himself off and sent a wild, confused, angry glance at Izuku, as if he was unsure if he should expose him in his rage before he figured out what the hell was happening. There was a roar of an engine, a very familiar engine, and Izuku shakily climbed to his feet. Kacchan, it's okay, he trailed off, and then Kacchan looked between him and arms before whirling on the hero. Can't you see he's effing concussed? He's bleeding. He needs a doc. Wait, he's bleeding? Look at his neck. And his effing hand. Kacchan yelled, and gods, why was Asuma's bike so loud he was so far away? Don't go yelling at Snipe's nephew like that. Oh, he was going all out, name-dropping and everything. What? Now Arms was looking wildly confused, and Kacchan decided to stick to what he was best at, making a loud, angry mess of everything. Yeah, and he's effing hurt. Kacchan shouted as the paramedics rushed up, shooing Arms and the heroes off so they could swarm Izuku and Kacchan and drag them to the ambulance. The rumbling was getting closer, and Izuku was finding it easier to breathe, because he just ruined everything, but his uncle was going to fix it. Just beyond the crowd, the motorcycle pulled up, and Izuku saw the brown hat over the crowd as the paramedics asked him questions and rooted around in his hair. Izuku! Asuma roared, pushing through the crowd. Zoo! The crowd parted like a wave at the sight of a very sad and packing pro, and Izuku numbly let the paramedics set him down in the ambulance. Zoo! Asuma called again, and suddenly Arms was looking very anxious as Snipe strode up to the paramedics, because Snipe was an extremely well-known and beloved hero, and Izuku had never even seen that guy before. Hey, is that your nephew Snipe? A reporter asked as Asuma pulled alongside Izuku. He's injured pretty badly, he needs to go to the hospital, the paramedic said. He's got a nasty head injury, clearly concussed. He'll see recovery girl at UA, Asuma replied immediately. Izuku, what happened? Izuku trailed off, looking at Asuma with wild eyes because what was he supposed to say? Listen, Izuku, you need to stay calm right now, Asuma said, letting his voice drop to that low timbre, loud enough for the paramedics and pros to hear, but not loud enough for the reporters to pick up. You just had a stress manifestation, alright? It's always rough on the body, but Recovery Girl is an expert in these things, the only one I trust, so these paramedics are going to take you right to UA? They have the proper equipment for it. Recovery Girl has been researching this stuff under Nizu for years, alright. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. Arms tightened up, the hose guy immediately commanded the attention of the media, the tree guy began to direct the crowd in pressing back, and Izuku looked at Asuma with wild eyes as he tried to figure out what was happening. Stress manifestations, especially for teleportation types and a mutation from your parents, at that, can be very hard on the body, Asuma repeated, this time much more slowly. Your body is going to be extremely volatile right now. You could blink out at any second, so I need you to focus, okay? With the head injury, he can't, the paramedic warned, but Asuma shook his head no, slowly taking off his mask so Izuku could focus on his eyes as he slowly approached him. Arms glanced over his shoulder and immediately moved to block the view of the cameras of his uncle's face, and Asuma nodded at Izuku slowly. If you feel the way you did just now, what I need you to do is focus very hard on going somewhere near that is safe. You have a head injury, we cannot have you getting lost when you're bleeding like that, okay? He cautioned, and Izuku slowly caught on. He was telling Izuku to slip into the meadow until he told him where to go. Now, these paramedics are going to take you to UA, where they're going to run some scans to figure out how new this is to your body. All right. Oh, if they scanned him now, they'd see how long he had the quirk, and Asuma needed to clear some stuff up first. He could understand this. Slowly, Izuku nodded to say he understood he had to go to the meadow and wait for the signal, or for the text to tell him what to do, and then go to where he was directed. Asuma met his eyes and then nodded once, and Izuku let himself fall into the meadow with a wisp of the scent of wildflowers. He heard an exclamation, a shout, and then it was just him and his river and the flowers. Taking a deep breath, he stumbled for his library, thumbing through to find the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe, and there. Bookmarked same as always. This was one of his easiest tests, something he'd done 1,000,000 times. He could do this in his sleep. Reaching into the pages, he pulled out a cordial and staggered to sit in his chair and check his phone. One text. Take the cordial. Fumbling for the top, Izuku took it off and let a drop fall on his tongue. Immediately, warmth spread through his body, like a weighted blanket falling across his body, and he went boneless in the chair. Flesh knit itself back together, healing without a single scar, and he let out a heavy breath as he felt his blood be replenished through his body. Tingles rolled down his spine, and he took a deep breath in, held it, and released it. His phone buzzed again, and Izuku checked it. Wait 30 minutes, then go to UA so we can get the paperwork fixed. 30 minutes. He could wait that long. 30 minutes was nothing. A blink when he was in the meadow. His phone buzzed one more time, and he realized with a sinking stone in his gut that he was in a group project with Kacchan 3 months ago and they had to trade phone numbers. The filth is not so filthy, Gremlin purred, and Izuku let out a huff of air. Of course you'd like him as soon as you found out he could lie, Izuku grumbled. It seems to be an important trait for you. I take it back. I have no friends. Good. Izuku unlocked his phone and tapped on the push notification. Kacchan, your uncle is a really FING good liar. Kacchan, guessing that's a family trait. Letting out a low, angry breath, Izuku tapped on his name and viciously changed it. Deku changed their name to Izuku. Izuku, normally, decent people would start with, thanks for saving my life, Izuku. Kacchan, don't think I owe you anything. Izuku? Fine. Die then. Kacchan, I would have gotten out. Izuku, okay, anything else to say or what? Kacchan, why the F would a pro hero be so DMN invested in hiding your quirk, huh? Izuku, if a pro hero is really invested in hiding my quirk, do you think I'd be able to tell you why? Kacchan, teleportation is rare, but that wasn't teleportation. Izuku, sure it was. We went in at one place, came out another. Kacchan, and we had to go through that weird but place to get there? Izuku, as far as everyone is concerned, that's just a mirage, and obviously it's new, so I haven't spent enough time to answer that question. Kacchan, you're there right now, aren't you? Izuku, I really can't answer these questions, Kacchan. Kacchan? Can't answer them in text? Izuku, can't answer them in general. Kacchan, because you don't want to, or because your uncle told you so? Izuku let out a hiss of air, and Gremlin let out a shriek of delight. Now is not the time to be encouraging teenage rebellion, we are in a FING crisis, Gremlin. Izuku snapped and Gremlin let out a deep purr. Did I encourage you, or laugh at you for being so terribly obedient? You spent literal thousands of years waiting for your dead master to put you back on his finger. Please tell me more about my obedience problems. At least I did it in style. You're lacking in the bite. Izuku growled under his breath and another text popped up. Kacchan, so because your uncle told you so. Izuku, the day I discuss my family life with you is the day you're found dead in a ditch, Kacchan. Kacchan, don't forget I covered for you. Izuku, don't forget that I saved your life. Kacchan, I could just not cover for you. Izuku, by all means, put your word up against the word of a UA teacher, pro-hero, and the plethora of legal documentation stating that a stress manifestation may be likely. Kacchan, I saw you. You knew exactly what you were doing, where to step, where to go, and how fast to do it. You didn't panic until after you realized what you did. That was a choice. Izuku, so I'm gonna ask you honestly. Izuku, does it actually matter? Kacchan, it mattered enough to lie to everyone for 10 years. Izuku, even if I did lie for 10 years, not every reason has to include you. Or anyone else, for that matter. Kacchan, the quirk registry exists for a reason, Izuku. Izuku, the quirk registry exists for a lot of reasons, Kacchan, and not all of them are good. Kacchan, what the f does that mean? Izuku quietly swore under his breath and checked the time. 15 more minutes. Objectively, he understood that Kacchan was trustworthy. But he was only trustworthy so long as he understood why he needed to keep his mouth shut. Izuku had to give him something, anything, but what could he give him? What could convince him to shut his mouth? Izuku stared down at his screen and thought about it, long and hard, and then his fingers started moving. Izuku, we waited 3 years before declaring Dad dead. And we only did it because he told us to. He wanted Mom to move on. He's not coming back. And it has everything to do with how much he loves us. Izuku, please stop asking questions. I can't answer them. I will probably never be able to answer them. And it's better that way. Answering questions is why I don't have a dad. Kacchan, what the hell does that mean? He breathed fire. That's nothing special. Izuku, he made a choice. Fire breathing was the choice he made, and it wasn't good enough. That's why my mom made the choice for me to be quirkless. So I could have a life. A chance. And I just threw all of that away for you. All of my sacrifices, putting up with the bullying and hatred, dealing with the FING pain of being worse than ordinary if that meant getting to live, I just gave up. For you. Izuku, I never really hated you. Detested you, sure. Maybe even loathed you. But I always thought you could be a hero, if you got over your complexes. I just gave up everything so you can be a hero. So leave me alone. Kacchan, you gave up everything? You gave up everything a long but time ago. You promised me you were going to be a hero with me. You promised. I wasn't even FNG mad you were quirkless. I was mad that suddenly we were 6 and you gave up. After 2 years of swearing up and down that you were going to make it, you just gave up. I thought it was because you were quirkless so I effing hated you. Now you weren't quirkless the entire time and you won't even tell me why. Izuku, I was 5. OFC, I wanted to be a hero. Every demon kid on the block swore that they were going to be heroes with you. Kacchan, yeah, but you could have made it. With or without a med quirk. And you knew you could have made it. Even after you gave up, you still knew you could have made it. And I want to know why. Izuku, because I grew up and realized that no matter how much I wanted to be a hero, no matter how much I could, it meant nothing in the face of whether or not I should. You should be a hero. You have that choice. I don't. Not all of us get flashy, safe quirks. Some of us get stuck with dangerous ones. Kacchan, how the hell is a teleportation quirk dangerous? Izuku hissed out of his teeth and decided he had to do yet another stupid thing today, because Kacchan, as ever, was not going to give up until he understood. That was his fatal flaw. his drive to understand. He had 10 minutes. Izuku, where are you? Kacchan. Paramedics just released me. I'm waiting by the bodega with the strawberry sandwiches for Dad. Izuku knew the one. Picturing the alley next to it in his mind, he slipped out of the meadow as Gremlin crowed in his mind. Is this rebellion? It's survival. Shut up, Izuku snapped as he stepped into the dank alleyway. Just ahead of him, he saw Kacchan slumped against the wall, staring down angrily at his phone, and without even asking for permission, Izuku walked up to him and grabbed him. What the foo? Kacchan swore as they were surrounded by wildflowers and the sound of the river. Well, here it is, Kacchan. Izuku shouted and threw up his arms. You like my FING library? Here, come look, let me show you. Deku, what the hell? Kacchan demanded, but Izuku was beyond listening. Angrily, he marched over to the shelves and practically forcibly ripped out books. Which is your favorite, huh? Izuku demanded. You like the Dresden Files? And McCaffrey? Terry Pratchett? Or are Western fantasy novelists not your sort? Because I got plenty of Japanese titles. Or here, how about this? Deku, are you losing your mind? Kacchan yelled as he ducked under a soaring copy of Good Omens. How about Neil Gaiman? This one's a favorite. Izuku declared as he flipped open a copy of Stardust. Obsidian Dagger, maybe? Not even taking the time to soak in the words, Izuku just plunged his hand in the book and grasped the handle of the ornate ceremonial dagger and yanked it out before lobbing the worn paperback at Kacchan's head. It connected and he stared at Izuku in something akin to horror as he brandished the long, deadly, black dagger. How about the Holy Grail? Maybe you'd like a taste of immortality, Kacchan, so you have plenty of time to reflect on your pig-headedness. Izuku, are you nuts, F-? Kacchan shouted as Izuku wildly gesticulated with his knife. I have literally had the one ring of power speaking bullshit into my brain for the past 2 months, Kacchan, so, yeah, I'm feeling a little FNG stressed. I'm not that bad, Gremlin muttered darkly as Izuku stared at Kacchan with wide, crazed eyes, twitching every so often just to drive home just how unhinged he was at the moment. Kacchan stared back before taking a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. You could have pulled anything out of a book right now, and you picked the huge FING knife, Izuku, he said, slowly, as if he was actually trying to keep his cool in front of an Izuku who had just completely flown off the handle. I thought it would make my point pretty effing clearly as to why you should mind your own dimmin' business. Kacchan stared at the knife in Izuku's hand before his eyes drifted up to look him in the eye, and Izuku deliberately stepped closer, feeling the frustration at the whole ordeal start to build. There's quirks that can cure cancer. There's quirks that can make someone immortal. There's quirks that can make black holes, Kacchan. But tell me, if you want to do something bad, or maybe something with good intentions, would you wait for the genetic lottery and a bit of luck, maybe for decades, for the perfect quirk? Or would it be easier to get yourself a writer, a novel with just one small, insignificant object that can bring you anything you want, and wait 1 month, and suddenly you have everything you ever wanted? What if someone just, say, wanted to blow up the world? All it takes is one badly written novel with a nicely placed MacGuffin, 1 month, and to me. That's all. That's it. That's all it will ever take. So tell me, Kacchan, would you trust me to be a hero that lives a life of mediocrity for the sake of everyone? Or do you still expect me to chase the glory and trust me to never care about anyone, never have anything I'm unwilling to lose, never have anyone that I would put over the rest of the world? Do you still trust me? Because I already F'd up once and pulled out the FING one ring to rule them all, and he won't go back. And I am clearly barely containing the situation, because I am obviously very close to losing my sheet. Do you trust me? Izuku threw the obsidian knife into the ground at Kacchan's feet and turned blazing eyes on him. Is your entitlement satisfied? Is your curiosity beaten down enough to stop bothering me? Will you expose me? Gremlin was curiously silent, but Izuku could feel the rage pounding in his veins. He knew he should care. He knew he should wonder if this was the Dmed ring around his neck, or if this was just the culmination of him being pulled so tightly he was ready to snap. His chest heaving, he glared at Kacchan, finding air peculiarly difficult to breathe. The only way I could be even more of a hero is if I dropped dead and never had any kids, because this quirk will only ever get worse, he hissed from the pit of his belly. It felt like a snake was crawling its way up his esophagus, threatening to break free and strike Kacchan down before him. Izuku's entire life was imploding. One split-second decision, and suddenly a lifetime of trauma of wondering what happened to Dad, why he never came back, why Izuku had to be alone and isolated and forgotten, left in plain sight, never to rise above his station, was overtaking his every nerve. He couldn't breathe. He could only feel the hurt, the bone-deep loneliness he was almost frightened to shed. Kacchan stared at him with red eyes, brows furrowed as he took this in. He was thinking. This wasn't a thinking situation. It was a yes or no. Did he trust him? Because Izuku sure didn't trust Izuku. Why was he thinking? I wouldn't, Kacchan finally said, and there it was. The confirmation he would never get from his mom or his uncle. That one single confirmation Izuku had been waiting for years, to stop caring that he had to make himself small, to stop caring about everything he'd lose so everyone could have the lives they wanted, the lives they deserved. I wouldn't, Kacchan repeated, and his tone was, trust you to never give AF about someone. To be a FING saint. Or whatever. You wouldn't be you. But I would trust you. To be a hero. To be out there. To love openly and loudly. Because I think I'm the only person I know that's smarter than you, and if I can figure out a way around anything that gets thrown at me, if I can always find option C, then I'm pretty FING sure you can stop this pity party you're having and figure out option C too. It felt like Izuku had been slapped in the face. What the hell was Kacchan saying? Did he even realize what he was saying? I'm not smarter than my dad, Kacchan, Izuku said before he could stop himself. Why the hell are you comparing yourself to some guy you haven't seen since you were 5, anyways? Kacchan shot back. What would a 5-year-old know about how smart a grown adult is? You've got a real problem with hero worship, Izuku. You should probably FING work on that. Izuku stared at him, and Kacchan stared back, and then Izuku looked at the mess of books around him, the full-blown temper tantrum he'd had. Well, that was over the top. He'd definitely gone off the rails this time. I think he deserved the book. Oh, now he was talking when it was no longer convenient to blame him. I don't know if you're losing your sheet because of that one-ring sheet. Gremlin, Izuku corrected and Katsuki blinked. You named it. He likes he. Gremlin. Honestly, it's kind of up in the air if he's the genuine ring, because technically the ring is merely sentient as a result of Sauron's will poured into it, and since there's no real Sauron, we scan the books, I didn't wake up anything else. It might just be. He's a little useless without the other rings. Turns people invisible, but I can just pop out of existence at will, makes me more charismatic, but other than that, in this universe, he doesn't have the same. He talks a lot more to, and likes to, encourage me to eat sensei. And you. Sometimes. But you lied to the arms guy, or at least tried to cover for me, so he thinks you're appropriately deceitful and slightly cleaner filth, in his eyes, now. Izuku was babbling, because he was now moderately embarrassed. You threw a book at my head. I only made contact with one. You're FING nuts, Izuku. Izuku pursed his lips and looked down at the swaying wildflowers around his knees. Pretty sure the whole school thinks I'm nuts, so that's nothing new. Honestly, you've been really weird for the past 2 months, Kacchan pointed out, and Izuku looked down at his chest. Wonder why. Is it the actual ring or the stress of pulling it out and not being able to put it back? I'd like to see you keep it together with the literal paragon of evil screaming to murder everyone FNG with your desk and turning out your bag and stealing your lunch on a daily basis, Izuku stated flatly. I think I've been pretty FNG calm, all things considered. He wants to roast your buddy's wings and slather them in barbecue sauce, and honestly, if he had opposable thumbs, I don't think I'd stop him some days. Gremlin purred in the back of Izuku's mind, and Izuku could have sworn he was preening. You could be a lot FNG worse. Things are going to get a lot FNG worse. I just outed myself as having a quirk, a rare kind of quirk, on national television. Then it's a stress manifestation, Kacchan said with a shrug, and Izuku stared at him like he'd grown a third head. So you're suddenly cool with the cover-up despite yelling at me for like a minute straight about a pity party. Well, you now have a quirk. What's stopping you from being a hero with teleportation? Kacchan asked, and Izuku blinked multiple times. You know your parents have to actually sign off on you joining the hero course? My mom spent a decade covering up my quirk. She's not going to just sign off on that. Kacchan paused and looked down at the flowers. Then throw a fit. I'm not throwing a fit at my mom. I don't know, you seem to be able to do it pretty well. Gremlin actually cackled at that, and Izuku pursed his lips. Your dad is coming for you, and I'm supposed to meet my uncle at UA. Don't tell anyone about this. You need Percy Jackson, Kacchan suddenly said, and then looked aside. If you don't have it already. You can get from places, but you can't sneak around. And I don't think you want to use Gremlin for that, but there's a cap in there that turns you invisible. Thanks. Yeah. An awkward pause ensued before Kacchan coughed. I can't believe you named him Gremlin. I wasn't going to call him Precious. Yeah. I'm going to drop you off at the bodega now. He's not actually coming. I just said that. Mom told me to walk home. Izuku blinked at him several times. She told you to walk? Yeah. So don't be surprised when you drop me and he's not waiting. She told him to not get me. You just got attacked. Yeah, and Izuku studied him for a second before stepping forward and grabbing his arm. With a breath of the scent of wildflowers, the two were behind the tree in Kacchan's backyard, hidden from view. See you at school if Mom doesn't? Pull you out or kill you? Yeah. We're not friends, Kacchan said suddenly, and Izuku blinked at him. Obviously. You can just stop being a D-, and I'll leave you alone. So long as you know, Kacchan said. Yeah, sure, Izuku said and stepped back into the meadow. At least he could now get out of awkward conversations with Kacchan faster. Awkward conversations with Katsuki. That felt better. You still have to see the elf. Stop calling him that. He shoots things very well. He's an elf. Please stop calling him that. How the hell did you get in here? Someone asked, and Izuku shrunk back awkwardly at the sight of the dead-eyed man in black coveralls. Jesus, when was the last time he brushed his hair? I'm trying to find my uncle? He asked awkwardly, and the man stared at him for a long, long moment. And who's your uncle? Hazutashi Asuma? The man squinted at him for a second, and Izuku squinted back at him. Did Uncle Asuma only tell his co-workers of the past several years his hero name? Dot or Snipe? I know who Hazutashi is, the man said gruffly. That doesn't explain how you're in here without a badge and the alarms aren't going off. Or why there's blood all over you. Izuku awkwardly tugged at the white collar coated in blood just peeking out of the black collar of his jacket. He had to look like hell right now. There was a villain attack, he said, and the man blinked at him. So you're injured? Not at the moment? So you've seen Recovery Girl and she set you to roam the halls? No. Where is your uncle? I don't know, it's kind of huge in here, and I just showed up. If you haven't seen Recovery Girl, then you're injured, and you need to go to the infirmary. I'm not injured. I know the blood patterns of a head injury, problem child. You need to go to the infirmary. Also, again, how did you get in here? My uncle told me not to talk to anyone, Izuku blurted, because he was entirely lost on how to talk his way out of this. This is pathetic, just use me. Izuku was going to ignore that. I'm your uncle's co-worker and a pro. Here, look, the man said in exasperation and pulled a card out of his pocket, waving a license in front of Izuku's face. Erase her head. You can talk to me now. I really can't. Can I just call Uncle Asuma and... Where are we? You're outside the second-year heroics course, the man snapped, and Izuku internally cringed, because, yes, there was a huge door right next to him with 2A printed on it. Thank God school was out already, because he was about to die of embarrassment. Right? Thanks. You're Izuku, right? Yes. You look like him. Wasn't it your birthday today? Gremlin vibrated in the weirdest way as a strange emotion took over Izuku's body. For a second, he couldn't place it, and then he realized what it was. It was the first time Izuku's birthday had been acknowledged by someone other than his mother and uncle in years, and for some reason the simple statement made a lump crawl up in his throat and tears start to prick at his eyes. His mouth opened and shut, at a loss for words, and the man kept staring at him in silence. What? No, He told everyone it was my birthday? Izuku asked, and gods, he was entirely healed, but his voice was still beyond raspy. Yeah. He talks about you a lot. But I haven't actually heard anyone say it's, Izuku trailed off, because today was entirely too much for him right now, and instead flushed bright red as there was a flicker of understanding in the man's dark eyes. Swallowing harshly, Izuku dug into his pocket for his almost dead phone and started unlocking it. Sorry, he apologized. I'll just call Uncle Asuma and ask where he's at. You look like you need to sit down. I'm fine, Izuku babbled as he got his contact list open. It's just been a really weird day. Just a really weird day. My teacher it's complicated, and then there was All Might, and then there wasn't All Might and my. The thing happened, and then something even worse happened, and I kind of ruined everything. I wasn't supposed to. If I didn't, he would've. My mom's going to be really upset and. Izuku! Uncle Asuma's voice cut through and Izuku spun on his heel, blanket relief washing over his face at the sight of his uncle standing there. The cowboy strode towards him, and Izuku swallowed hard as the phone slipped out of his grasp and hit the ground. Asuma, Sorry, Eraserhead. Asuma apologized as he grabbed Izuku's arm and pulled him close to check him over. He's had a bad day. He'll get out of your hair now. He wasn't supposed to do what? Eraserhead asked, and Izuku froze, staring with blanket terror at his uncle's mask. He had a stress manifestation. Teleportation quirk. We need to talk to Nizu about it, Asuma said, the lie falling out as easy as breathing, and Izuku ducked his head down and stared at the ground. Then I need to be there, Eraserhead said, as if it was fact, and Izuku stiffened up. Asuma's hands tightened on Izuku's arms and Izuku trained his eyes on the ground. This looked bad. This looked really bad. It's alright, Eraserhead, you have to go on patrol, anyways, Asuma said immediately. You can't put quirk suppressant cuffs on a traumatized kid, but I'll know when he's about to activate. He's going to be unstable for 24 hours. The patrol can wait, Eraserhead replied, his voice gruff and straightforward. I'll go with you. Eraserhead, it's fine, Asuma insisted, the slightest edge creeping into his voice as Izuku kept his back deliberately placed to Eraserhead. Okay, with as much as you talk about the kid, I know you love him to pieces, and you know as well as I do that out of the few instances of documented teleportation quirk stress manifesting, a good chunk of them just disappeared and never showed up again. What is actually going on here? Eraserhead asked flatly, and Izuku could just see Asuma's lips pursing under that mask. Fine, Asuma finally said. He's going to UA year after next, anyways, someone else should at least know to keep an eye on him. Izuku, let's go. Eraserhead bent down and picked up Izuku's fallen phone, and Izuku swallowed hard and turned to take it back with trembling hands. Do we like him or will we eat him? He was never going to get off the cannibalism thing, was he? Thanks, Izuku mumbled, and Asuma took off his cloak to swing around his shoulders, like he did when Izuku was little. On instinct, Izuku's fingers grasped at the cloak and pulled it around his body, trying to burrow down in the material as he kept his head down. Asuma slung an arm over his shoulders and pulled him in close, casting a glance over at Eraserhead that, from the tilt of his head, could only be interpreted as a warning glance. This is only because I trust you, Asuma said shortly. Yeah, Eraserhead grunted and Izuku pulled the cloak even more tightly around his shoulders. Asuma led Izuku off, Eraserhead lurking at their footsteps, and Izuku kept his eyes trained on the linoleum. He thought UA was too classy for linoleum floors. How had he never been here, anyways? You despise the heroes looking at you with pity, Gremlin hissed, entirely unhelpful as usual, and Izuku sunk down even more. He had never even heard of Eraserhead, which could either mean Izuku wasn't paying attention, or he was underground. It was a toss-up of the two. Which coworker was he, anyways? Not Yamada. Izuku knew Yamada was present Mike. Maybe he was Aizawa? Asuma didn't talk about work often, but he mentioned Aizawa a lot. He sounded like a sloth, and Asuma had a soft spot for him. The guy certainly looked tired enough to fit the profile. Wasn't Aizawa the one that expelled an entire class? Izuku shivered and pulled the cloak even closer. Asuma was mad. Izuku could feel it all over him, and he was dreading going home. The silence between the three of them was tense, and Izuku found himself fighting back tears. "He is not mad at you," Gremlin crooned, as if Izuku would believe anything he said. He was absolutely mad at Izuku. Izuku scarcely even noticed the massive halls as they passed through them, but every step had him clutching the cloak tighter and tighter around his body. He still had to tell Asuma, he had to tell Katsuki to get him to keep his mouth shut. That definitely wasn't going to go over well. And All Might knew something was up, but he couldn't tell Asuma about that. It wasn't his secret. He was going to have to make All Might look really bad, but he could work his way around that. Had he ever lied to Asuma? Could he lie to Asuma? Or would Asuma understand that whatever Izuku couldn't tell him was important that he didn't know? He didn't lie to his family. He'd never lied to his family. "We're here," Asuma said as they reached a pair of double doors. Taking a deep breath, he turned to Izuku and placed his hands on his shoulders. "I need you to understand that I'm not mad at you." "Squirt?" "Told you," Gremlin hissed, sounding utterly self-satisfied, but Izuku didn't lift his head, only nodded once. Asuma's hands tightened on Izuku's shoulders, and he took a breath, as if he was going to say something, before he let it out in a frustrated sigh and gave up. And then he knocked. "Come in." A pleasant voice called, and Asuma pushed the door open. Izuku had seen Nizu on Zoom meeting calls before, on the off occasion when Asuma just did not want to go in on his day off to the meetings. He certainly hadn't expected him to be so small, sitting on a plush couch with comically large sneakers set up on the cushion because he couldn't reach far enough to let them dangle. Or, well, he could, but it didn't let him prop up his back. The rat chimera was holding a steaming cup of tea, sipping at it passively, and Izuku caught the telltale hint of jasmine. His favorite. "Come in," Nizu said cheerfully, and the three of them moved inside. Asuma nudged Izuku to a plush love seat and took a seat next to him, and Izuku swallowed hard. "Hi," he mumbled, because what else was he going to say in this situation? "Hello, Izuku," Nizu replied politely. "May I ask why you brought Aizawa, Hazutashi?" "I brought him because he's too FING smart, and it'll be better if at least one more pro knows about this as a safeguard," Asuma answered honestly. "He's probably the best one to know in this situation." So, "You asked me to forge medical documents for the quirk registry," Nizu said, and Eraserhead coughed before sending a slightly incredulous look at Asuma. "Hazutashi, what the hell?" he swore, and Asuma let out an incredibly awkward laugh. "Well, when you put it like that, Nizu, I assume this has to do with that book you smuggled in to scan in Powerloader's private lab?" Nizu continued, and Izuku sent a look overflowing with "what the hell" energy at Asuma. "You said?" "Yes, it has to do with the book," Asuma replied honestly, and Izuku shrank down in his seat. "It would be better if Izuku just showed you all honestly." Izuku's eyes nearly bugged out of his head, because the meadow was, well, he hadn't cleaned up the knife or any of the books he was throwing everywhere. Oh gods, this was an actual nightmare. Should we wait for Mom, because he really needed to clean up the signs of his temper fit? "I already talked to her," Asuma replied. "She told me to go ahead with full disclosure. She opted not to come because..." "Mad at me?" Izuku asked softly, and Asuma looked over at him. "No. She's handling other things right now." What other things could she possibly be handling? Just how bad was the situation that she couldn't even be here right now? "Okay," Izuku mumbled. "She's just getting in contact with one of your dad's old friends, but she's hard to reach, so Inko may be gone for a day or two," Asuma explained, and Izuku's brows furrowed as he tried to work out what the hell dad's old friends had to do with anything, and... Oh, she was already setting up an escape plan for Izuku. He really had messed everything up. Did you really? Gremlin hissed. Would it be as bad if you had teleportation from the start? Izuku was going to ignore that. Will she be okay? I trust the woman she's meeting. She'll be fine, Asuma promised, and Izuku focused back on the carpet. Okay. So, Nizu said and sipped at his tea. You scanned a book, and it had a peculiar energy attached to it, and then I never saw the book again, and you never brought it up again. And now your nephew is here, and you want to forge medical documents for registration. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Well, then let's see it, Nizu prompted, and Izuku sunk further down in his seat. It's kind of a mess right now, Izuku mumbled, and Asuma's head tilted in a very, very slow manner. Why is it a mess? He asked, perhaps too smoothly. Katsuki knew something was up and wouldn't leave it, so I had to. Izuku, what the hell? Asuma said immediately, and Izuku pursed his lips. Did I hit him in the head with stardust and tried to hit him with good omens? That's what you went with? I also pulled the obsidian dagger out as proof. You went with a knife? It was that or the Holy Grail, and I wanted the knife for the collection anyways. You pulled a knife on Katsuki? I didn't point it at him. I just waved it around. Is there anything else you did today that I should know about? Asuma asked, and Izuku sunk down further in the seat. Did I met All Might? Yeah, actually, why the hell was he trying to cover for you? Also, Gremlin burned the sludge guy. When did Gremlin burn the sludge guy? Right before All Might saved me from him? And gave me a concussion? All Might gave you a concu. Nizu politely cleared his throat, and the two of them looked up in unison, where Aizawa was staring at them like he was watching a train wreck in slow motion, and Nizu looked like... Izuku did not trust those eyes, and he especially didn't like that Gremlin was stirring an interest in his presence. He is smart, Gremlin purred, and Izuku sent a screaming variation of an internal no at the Dmed ring. But it seems like you've had a hectic day, Izuku, Nizu commented, and Izuku had a flashback to daydreaming about turning his homeroom teacher into a steak. But it was clearly something we need to talk about later, Asuma said, and Izuku blew out his cheeks. Yeah, Izuku muttered. Anyways, the quirk. Nizu prompted, and Izuku sighed. I'm really sorry about the mess, he apologized again, and then looked at the three of them. I've never done it with 3 people. You should be able to manage it, 2 isn't a problem for you, Asuma said, and Izuku let out a low sigh, nodding several times. Okay, he said and latched onto Asuma's wrist. If you two could just grab me, please? Aizawa was really a silent sort of guy, like he was processing everything and mulling it over before he spoke. Without a word, he pushed himself off the doorframe and went to lay a hand on Izuku's shoulder as Nizu slipped off of his couch to join them. A paw was laid on Izuku's knee, and the waft of wildflowers filled the room as the 4 of them slipped into Izuku's world. The sun was shining. Izuku tilted his head back to look at the puffy clouds before focusing back on his little sanctuary, which had never seen so many people before. This is the meadow, he said as Aizawa released his shoulder and looked around in silence. Nizu blinked at the towering bookcases, and Izuku surreptitiously kicked the obsidian blade laying on the ground to the side. Asuma's eyes burned into him, and Izuku winced slightly. I don't think I've ever seen this place with books not on the shelves, Asuma stated flatly, and Izuku rushed to pick up the books laying all over the ground. It's been a long day, okay? Izuku muttered as he stacked the tossed books up and teetered over to the bookshelves. Did you manifest all these books yourself? Nizu asked as Izuku juggled the stack of books to put them back into their places. No, he replied. They're all from outside. Asuma bought most of them. I hit a lot of used bookstores and clearance sales. That it doesn't rain in here? Or Aizawa asked, and Izuku shook his head. Flowers just change colors sometimes, he replied as he slid Time Quake back into place. Mostly with the seasons outside. So it's a pocket dimension, Nizu supplied. I think so, Izuku replied as he put a Pern novel back into its spot with the rest of them. I can exit anywhere I want, so long as I have a vague idea of where I'm going, but I can get more accurate with how much I've been to a location. How I ended up in UA, without tripping the alarm. You should probably fix that, And you can pull objects out of these books? Nizu prompted, and Izuku frowned, flicking through a copy of the novelization of the Black Pearl. So long as they fit in the pages, Izuku replied. I can't pull out living organisms. But he can pull out sentient things, Asuma grumbled, and Izuku internally winced. Yeah, that's been a problem, he admitted, and then pushed through the pages with one hand, the ink staining his fingertips as he rooted around for the compass. Here. Pulling the compass free, he tossed it up and caught it. Jack Sparrow's compass, he said. It's fully functional, works according to the rules of the universe. It'll point you in the direction of the thing you most desire. Probably won't work in here, but it'll work outside. You couldn't have pulled anything else out? Asuma deadpanned. Would you like me to pull out more swords? I think I'm running out of room in my bedroom, Izuku retorted. So you have the power to pull out virtually anything from the pages of a book, and you're using it on compasses and swords, Aizawa stated, possibly too dryly. If you were 14 and read nothing but fantasy and sci-fi, you'd want a lot of swords, too, Izuku grumbled as he snapped the book shut and slipped it back into the shelf. I would rather he keep pulling out swords, considering he accidentally pulled out the one ring of power from the Hobbit and named him Gremlin, Asuma said flatly, and Izuku winced. That was a one-time thing and he's pretty well behaved. Izuku protested. No, I'm not, Gremlin hissed. You have the one ring of power? Aizawa asked. Yes and no, Izuku replied and blew out a breath. I do have the one ring of power, but he's not quite the one ring. Well, I wouldn't call him a knockoff. He evolved, Asuma supplied. It's literally the weirdest thing and he's banned from pulling out anything else that's sentient until we figure out what's going on. The ring doesn't have Sauron's power to pull on, because Sauron doesn't exist, so he seems to purely exist on Izuku's power, and doesn't follow the same laws of Middle-earth. So, to be clear, Snipe, you knew there was a 13-year-old child, perceived as quirkless by his peers, likely being bullied, running around with a powerful weapon like the Ring of Power, with a quirk like this, and you didn't say anything? Aizawa clarified and Gremlin grumbled in the back of Izuku's mind. It was a family matter, Asuma shot back. Izuku can control himself. He has done nothing but control himself until today. We've never had a single incident, and the only time he's acted out was because a kid he used to take baths with was dying in front of him by the same man that presumably tried to kill him. It was under control. This is not the sort of thing you handle on your own, Aizawa said. I didn't handle it on my own. I had Inko. The registry exists for a reason, Hazutashi. And with one dedicated hacker, it's a risk. It takes one leak. Not to mention there are so many government officials with access to it that would look at a quirk like Libriomancer's library and Asuma trailed off and Izuku felt his eyes on him. My dad is legally dead, Izuku said quietly. Because someone found out about his quirk and he had to flee the country. It can't be registered. And so, it has to be registered as a teleportation quirk, Nizu said, as if it was the easiest thing in the world. It probably was to him. It wouldn't be the first time a powerful quirk was misregistered for the purposes of secrecy. However, if his father had a similar quirk, it would beg the question of if people were waiting for Izuku to manifest a quirk. That's why Inko is gone at the moment, Asuma said. We have an exit strategy in case things go south, but if we cut and ran now, it wouldn't be fair to Izuku and would only look more suspicious. Especially if he manifested a quirk and didn't register it. That's a felony, and we have to have a limited amount of people breathing down his neck. So were you going to tell us about this before or after we admitted him into Gen Ed? You said he aced every practice exam, Aizawa asked, and Izuku internally cringed, because that was just a polite way of saying Asuma wouldn't shut up about him. I wasn't going to tell you at all, Asuma stated flatly. He was going to live his whole life as quirkless. It was safer that way, and it wasn't going to factor into anything. He would have brought the one ring of power into UA. And? It hasn't been a problem at Aldra, except for, well, one instance, but it was more of. Aldra was the problem. Asuma glanced at Izuku's chest, where the scar still existed, and Izuku looked down at the flowers swaying at his knees. You don't need me for this conversation, Izuku said and kicked his shoes off. It is a conversation about your future, Gremlin warned, but Izuku had had enough today and was mentally checking out. His socks were peeled off, and then he was heading for the river. Izuku, wait, Asuma started to say, but Izuku was just tired. I've had a very bad day today, and you've been making all of my decisions for me until now. You can make a few more, Izuku snapped as he marched through the grass. Anger again. Honestly, he didn't know if it was Gremlin, or if the presence of Gremlin was just teaching him that he was allowed to be angry. Izuku reached the smooth stone bordering the bank of the water and bent down to roll up his pant legs so he could sit down, legs submerged halfway up his shins. Taking a deep, calming breath, he tilted his head back and let the sun beat down on him. A breeze ruffled his hair and he took a moment to just breathe in the reality of his situation. He wished he had a friend to talk to about this. Anyone really he would take. But the only person his age that knew about this was Katsuki, and Katsuki was... Katsuki. Izuku wasn't sure they could ever be friends. They could tolerate each other, maybe even respect each other, but they couldn't be friends. Not after everything that happened. Katsuki never really had a right to be angry with him to begin with, but he'd never admit that. Have you considered that you might be too willing to let adults make decisions for the rest of your life? Gremlin asked, and Izuku shushed him. Have you considered that you can make your own choices? Gremlin whispered. Honestly, I hate you sometimes, Izuku said, and Gremlin stirred in discontent. Do you hate me for being right, or because I'm all you have? Both? Izuku breathed. I hate you for both. Izuku had turned himself into a nest. Quarantined away onto the couch, he was piled under mounds of blankets with the AC on full blast as Asuma ordered food for dinner. Mom was gone. He'd been bullied by his teacher in front of the entire class, found out probably one of the most guarded secrets in the world, been attacked by a villain, almost died, saved Katsuki, of all the people, outed himself as having a quirk on live television, told not one, but 3 people the secret of his quirk, and he turned 14. And he didn't go to the aquarium. Asuma had been quiet since they got home. He just told Izuku the scent of blood would only make him feel worse and sent him to take a shower. Nizu had said something to him, and both Izuku and Gremlin were sure of it. Izuku hadn't even told him what happened at school. In hindsight, it was an innocuous comment by his sensei, and it would look that way to just about anyone. That was how they did it. A small comment here and there, calling attention to how Izuku dreamed above his station. That was how it always happened. And the students would take it as permission to torment him when his back was turned. And Izuku couldn't do anything. So, now, he was dealing with it by being on his phone. It was still charging and he knew social media was not a healthy way to deal with problems, but he didn't know what else to do. He couldn't bring himself to touch a book right now. Trending topics in your area. Izuku was really not dealing with this. It's mean, but I guess bullying does work. Poor Midoriya. Oh, Midoriya was lying to everyone? Oh, someone called it a stress manifestation. How can Midoriya be stressed? It was Bakugo LMFAO. Bakugo's like? The worst? To him? What is Midoriya in love with him or something? If I thought Midoriya had any rights before, I definitely don't now. LMFAO. Either the beach was lying or he effing jump-started his genes to save Bakugo of all effing people. Like who TF does that? He's a effing doormat. No self-respect. Y'all are really bullying Midoriya on All Might's internet. FHDS Kevichdis King SF. Midoriya doesn't even have a Twitter. Bully away. Can everyone stop doxing Midoriya like demon? I guess Bakugo's short fuse is infectious. Midoriya's quirk really exploded on out there, didn't it? One day you will understand the validity of murder, Gremlin whispered, and Izuku swallowed hard before setting his account to private. He wasn't going to out himself as having a Twitter right now. The only selfies of him that made it online were in the Discord servers and in private messages. Izuku, are you okay? Asuma called from the other room. You're really quiet there, buddy. That I'm fine, Izuku replied, and Asuma walked into the room, holding his phone and staring down at Izuku. That you're on Twitter, he said, and Izuku shrunk down in the blankets. Yeah. Asuma sighed and sat down next to him. You shouldn't read stuff like that, Zu. Why not? Izuku asked softly. I can pretend they're not saying anything, but I'll still know they were saying it. But what does reading it do? You can know and not read. Reading means I can look them in their eyes at school and know what they said about me. It's not even certain that you are going back to school. Why not? Going to another one doesn't solve anything. It was on TV. And now it's all over Twitter. I can't run from it. You can at least go to a school that doesn't have a history of bullying. Or homeschool. Fresh starts aren't a bad thing. What? Are you asking me for my opinion now? Izuku asked, and he hated that he sounded bitter. Yes, I'm asking for your opinion. I know we didn't give you a choice with a lot of things, but you do have choices. I want to be a hero. Would I have a choice there? Izuku asked, and then he froze at the words that came out of his mouth. Did he actually say that? That if your mom says yes, I wouldn't say no, Asuma replied carefully, and Izuku looked at him with blatant confusion. Seriously? It would be a surprisingly good cover, and if anything happens when you're older, you would have access to so much support and have interpersonal relationships beyond me. So yeah, I think it's a good idea. Izuku stared at Asuma with bug eyes. Asuma stared back at him, and a stunned silence ensued, only broken by the cold rumble of the AC. Did you just say that? Izuku clarified. Yeah, I did. And at the very least, if you go to UA, they won't be looking at you as someone who's a liability and has only trained with your quirk for a year. We'd make sure you were in 1A with Aizawa. That's partially why I let him know what was going on. You were thinking about this? It would be different if you were really quirkless. Not because I don't think you could have done it, if you were quirkless. If you were just quirkless and wanted to be a hero, I would have been training you from day one. Put you in martial arts, maybe got you on support items, whatever. There's going to be moments when your quirk that your body will naturally want to rely on your quirk, like today. If you took a few seconds to think today, you would have figured out a way to get Katsuki out of there, but your brain shut off. You decided to move, because the kid you used to take baths with was dying in front of you. A brain with a quirk and a brain without are two different beasts. It was too much of a risk. But what about the other half of my quirk? Izuku asked quietly, and Asuma hummed. Been thinking about that. If we get Power Loader in on our sheet, we can say you make support items. You may not have a choice about being a hero, if I'm being honest. What? Izuku asked and looked at Asuma in something akin to alarm. Nizu will only forge the documents if you agree to take the entrance exam. And if Inko agrees to let you, Asuma added in a grumble. And you can't half-butt it either. He'll know. What? Gremlin was cackling again, but Izuku didn't think this was very funny. If you're a hero, you're subject to higher scrutiny, primarily from him, and you've got that. What? You have Gremlin. Basically, this is Nizu's way of putting you on a watch list, and he wants you in 1A, because I am related and therefore not subjective. He will actually F with your scores if you don't do this, Izuku. And you're okay with your boss blackmailing you? Izuku clarified, and Asuma sighed and rubbed at his eyes. Well, no, but I would rather have you on Nizu's watch list than you on the Hero Commission's watch list. And he does have a point. On an ethical standpoint, I can't be subjective. I changed your diapers. You're practically my kid. I helped raise you. Your personality has changed a bit, and to me, some of it is an improvement. What do you mean, improvement? Izuku demanded, and Asuma looked at him with sad eyes. The Izuku of 2 months ago would have never risked himself like that. He thought of his mom too much. It's like you. I don't know. It's like you're more willing to put who you are as a person first now. You always let us make your decisions for you. And I think we messed up somewhere. We wanted you to have a life, but I think you don't really have one, and when you're grown, I don't think that will change. And I want that to change. So, Nizu aside. My points on hiding in plain sight aside. What do you want to do? Izuku was silent for a moment, thinking about it desperately. I wish I wasn't blackmailed, honestly, because if I had the choice, I would want to get in just on my own power, he admitted, and Asuma let out a long breath. Then ace the test. With just teleportation. No support items allowed, he said and stood up. But I'm sorry. I wanted your birthday to be better than this. Izuku looked down at the phone in his hands, the evidence of how much he was despised right in front of him. It would have been the same as ever, he replied with a sigh. At least something happened. Do you want to go back to Aldera? Asuma asked, and Izuku blew out his cheeks as he stared at the feed. That I don't know. Well, you're officially on medical leave. If you're going with heroics, we have to plan out what your quirk will be. It's known now that you can use it on other people, so we may have to call it a pocket dimension. Try to find cloaking tech for your bookshelves. There's plenty of books with that sort of thing. We want to keep people's perception of you as far from that as possible, okay? All of my support equipment will be from books, Izuku pointed out. Yeah, well, if you're detaining villains in your meadow, you don't want to leave your entire arsenal exposed. It won't make sense if you keep your hobby in the place where you may have to leave someone. We don't even know if I can leave someone, Izuku pointed out. Then catch a spider and leave it in a jar in there, Asuma replied dryly. It'll be fine. If it kills it, that's inhumane. There are no animals there. I don't even have birds. Or fish. I've never even seen an ant. It's just flowers. It's a spider, Izuku. I saw you try to go after one with a blaster before I could tell you no. You just don't want to catch it. Izuku stared at Asuma for a second and then looked at the scorch mark on the wall. That it looked poisonous. You could have just used a slipper. But the blaster was right there. The slipper was on your foot. Would you rather kill a spider with a slipper or a blaster? I would rather my ridiculously overpowered nephew not destroy my apartment. It's my birthday, I can't take criticism right now. Asuma snorted and leaned over to ruffle Izuku's hair. I need to take a shower. The food will be here soon. Listen for the door, yeah? I will, Izuku promised. Thanks, Asuma said and stood up. Your mom really wanted to be here. I know, Izuku murmured. She couldn't text? The woman is weird about phones. She left it with me. Okay, Izuku mumbled and stared down at his phone. Do I need your phone too? No. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing, please, Izuku murmured, and Asuma let out a low breath from his nostrils. I'll stop apologizing. And then his uncle was off, leaving Izuku with his comments. If you keep reading these, you will make things very easy for me, Gremlin said, and Izuku pursed his lips. Is that a fair warning, or you telling me to stop? I don't like them. I don't like this Twitter. You and everyone else on Twitter, buddy, Izuku muttered as he kept scrolling. I like the Discord. The word is nice. And the memes are fun. It's meme, Izuku corrected, for perhaps the millionth time. The memes, Gremlin hissed, and Izuku hissed back from between his teeth. Compost bin, he warned. The neighbor below us has won. I will devour your soul. Yeah, okay, Izuku muttered and flicked through the feed. It's gonna be real funny when Midoriya comes in like he's hot sheet. Can't wait for him to find out he didn't get a beating. BC. It's not cool to beat on quirkless peeps. Midoriya is free real estate now, buddies. How are they even tweeting these things with their whole chest? It wasn't cool to beat on quirkless kids, but stealing their homework was fine? Dumping out their bags? Breaking all their pencils? Pouring bleach in their desks? We will eat them. We really won't. We will. Can we stop with the cannibalism thing? How many times are we going to talk about this? I stopped everything else. You really didn't. You like it? I don't. Is good practice. What's good practice? You saying no. I think I have that down to a science. Do you? Izuku wished the DMN thing had a mute button sometimes. All he did was try to antagonize Izuku. It was exhausting. A DM notification popped up and he sighed before swapping over to see who it was. Tosh. A long breath escaped Izuku's lips and he opened the message. Tosh. Tosh, wasn't your last name Midoriya? Suzuki. Tosh, this you? There was an image attached of Izuku's hand slapping into Katsuki's from a profile view, pushing through the explosion to reach him, and Izuku had to admit, it was a pretty good picture. He looked half decent. Tosh, the news said it was you. Tosh, you didn't tell me you had a quirk like that. So the news wasn't reporting on a stress manifestation. It was only going around the school. And all of Mizudafu, apparently. It was probably illegal or something for them to discuss it, or it had to be from a verified source. Izuku wasn't sure he could talk to Tosh about this. Tosh was one of his friends who was cagey about discussing his quirk, which was why they bonded in the first place. Izuku would never talk about his quirk, would simply ghost the conversation, and if you asked Tosh about his, he'd straight up shut it down. If Izuku was willing to bet, Tosh had some kind of quirk that branded him a villain. It was a specific behavior, one Izuku was familiar with from his earlier days on forums he shouldn't have been on when he was 10. Zuzu, so I'm not trending in Tokyo yet. Tosh, no? Zuzu, you should search my surname. The doorbell rang and Izuku locked his phone, setting it aside so he could get up and get the food. He probably looked like trash right now. The eye bags were out there, his hair was barely moisturized, he didn't even do a twist out, and he was in Snipe pajama bottoms and a space cat shirt, which probably clashed horribly. And the DLVI guy probably saw him on the news, so there was that. Dragging himself to the front door, he answered it, and the DLV guy startled at his appearance. He'd seen the news. Izuku stared at him for a second, blinking slowly and steadily. "Hi," he said, and wow, his voice sounded hollow. "Hi," the DLV guy finally said, after an awkward pause, and held out the bag of food to Izuku. "Here you go." "Thanks," Izuku said dully and took it. The guy handed it over and took a deep breath, staring at Izuku for a second, and Izuku stared at him. "What were manners, again?" "Hope your day gets better," the DLV guy finally said, and Izuku slowly, ever so slowly nodded once. "You too." "Why did he say that?" "Bye," the DLV guy said after an awkward pause. "Bye," Izuku replied and just swung the door shut. That had to be the most humiliating experience of his life. With a sigh that was far too old for his 14-year-old body, Izuku carried the bag into the kitchen and started to pull out the containers of food. Asuma ordered way too much for 2 people. Was he trying to feed an army or something? Izuku didn't think they needed this much food. Asuma knew he didn't eat that much. Container after container, and Izuku found himself frowning. Was Asuma expecting company? He didn't tell Izuku anything. But Izuku had to get everything ready all the same. Setting out the plates, he arranged the containers on the table and rifled around for their chopsticks. The shower in the other room shut off and Izuku stuck his head down the hallway. "Hey, uncle," he called. "Yeah," Asuma shouted from the bathroom. "Why is there so much food? That I didn't tell you?" Asuma popped his head out of the bedroom, dripping wet and blinking. "Aizawa is swinging by for dinner, since I felt bad he had to cancel his patrol for this." "What?" "He's bringing his husband, so..." Asuma's eyes swept up and down Izuku's appearance. "You might want to change. Also, your hair is frizzy. Go put in more conditioner." "He managed to get married?" Gremlin asked, and Izuku winced at the undercurrent of judgment. "What? I would sooner marry the elf." "Now is not the time for me to find out you have preferences, Gremlin," Izuku hissed. "He looks like he rolled out of a compost bin." "Gremlin," Izuku hissed in warning, and Asuma blinked at him. "Now is not the time for Gremlin to go cannibalistic," he said, and Izuku's eye twitched. "Not when I have 2 pros in my house. I need him to behave." "I'd rather him be a cannibal," Izuku replied and turned on his heel to go set out 2 more plates and some guest chopsticks. "This better not be a ploy to make him like me, Asuma. I'll make him hate me, I promise." "He needs to start his evaluation now, not in a year, Izuku," Asuma called and shut the bedroom door. Izuku hissed under his breath as he banged around in the kitchen to get out 2 more plates and locate the guest chopsticks. Asuma's bedroom door opened again. "And please go change. My nephew wearing my merch just makes me look egotistical." "You are egotistical," Izuku shot back. It wasn't his choice to put up Snipe posters, after all. They don't need to know that. The door slammed shut and Izuku slid into his bedroom to hunt down some jeans to wear. The space cat shirt was fine. 2 pros? Which pro was he married to? The doorbell rang as Izuku struggled to pull his skinny jeans over his heels before he fell over. Did Asuma really have to do this today? Of all the days? It couldn't have waited until tomorrow? And why did Aizawa's husband have to be here? Why did he even have to know Gremlin would pick his uncle over Aizawa, for that matter? I thought it was an innocent observation, Gremlin muttered petulantly. It really wasn't, Izuku gritted out. Zu, get the door, please. Asuma called, and what was he even doing that was taking so long? I'm getting it. Izuku shouted and just stepped in and out of the meadow to get to the front door, because he was officially going to be lazy until he dropped dead, and unlocked it before swinging it open. Aizawa was standing there, looking surprisingly less like a mess, in jeans and a long-sleeved black shirt, and next to him was Preppy Nazgul? Okay, life officially made no sense. So, little listener, that was one hell of a birthday, huh? Present Mike asked as the four of them sat around the table. Asuma didn't have people over often. Izuku knew that before they moved in he definitely lived fast and loose, with a rotating cast of men coming through his apartment, but since they moved in he hadn't seen Asuma bring a single man home. Mom didn't really have any friends beyond work friends, because having a quirkless son had really made everyone uncomfortable, and Asuma didn't really hang out with other pros. It had been pretty quiet in their home. The occasional sidekick would drop by, but that was more for work than anything else. Asuma had strictly professional relationships with everyone, so this whole dinner party thing was entirely unheard of. And Present Mike was right there, valiantly trying to carry the conversation and include Izuku in everything, even center him, and Izuku wasn't sure if that was because he was just used to being around kids, or because he knew it was almost always the three of them in their non-traditional family unit, and Izuku was used to being around adults more than anyone else, and not used to being excluded from conversations. Izuku liked him either way. Gremlin did not agree. Yeah, he said as he stuffed a piece of broccoli into his mouth and shot a look at Asuma. It was definitely weird. I'd say congrats on the new quirk, but gods, I can't even imagine how you're feeling right now, Present Mike continued, and Izuku blinked a few times. He certainly didn't expect that from someone with such a stupidly powerful quirk. Or someone with a quirk at all. Weird, Izuku admitted. I'm just glad Shoyuta could clear his schedule. You've got to be feeling funny right now. Hazutashi said the scans came back as pretty stable, but accidentally teleporting out of a crime scene had to be pretty and terrifying. I don't like him, Gremlin hissed. Too bright. Bright, bright, bright. I think it was even weirder to find myself in the middle of... Actually, I'm not sure where it was. Nizu said it was a pocket dimension, but I don't even know what that means, Izuku replied, and Aizawa squinted at him for a second. Being a pro in a relationship had to be weird. Here Aizawa was at dinner, lying to his husband's face, and the weirdest thing was that if Present Mike ever found out, he probably wouldn't even be mad. Because it was part of being a hero. Granted, Asuma had never lied to Izuku's face, but Asuma had the luxury of just saying, "You don't need to know." Aizawa definitely did not have that luxury right now. A pocket dimension, huh? That had to be weird. What was it like? Present Mike prompted, with a sort of sincerity that said he was genuinely interested in whatever Izuku had to say. It was like this field of wildflowers with a river. I didn't go too far in it, but there were no birds or insects or anything. It was just a field, Izuku explained, remembering that he had to cloak and perhaps shield the bookshelf. Wow. You've lived in a city your whole life, right? That had to be weirdly quiet. Yeah, it actually was really weird, Izuku admitted. Sometimes, when outside got too loud and he entered the meadow, it felt like getting smacked in the face with utter silence. I am kind of excited to go back. Preferably as soon as this meal was over and these men were out of his demon house. Aizawa, is everything okay? Asuma asked. You're not eating. Aizawa wasn't looking at Izuku, but it definitely felt like he was looking at Izuku. Was Izuku lying too well? He really shouldn't judge Izuku off whether or not he could lie. Izuku had been lying to everyone long before Gremlin came about. And yet you still are terrible at it, Gremlin complained. Preppy Nazgul is too gullible. Yeah, it's just been a long day, Aizawa replied. Had to expel a kid today I really had high hopes for. Yeah, I heard about that, but Asuma looked at Izuku awkwardly, and Izuku scrunched up his nose as he stabbed the rice with his chopsticks. I happened, he supplied. It's not every day a quirkless kid manifests a teleportation or pocket dimension quirk or whatever it is, little listener, Present Mike said, not unkindly. That's the sort of thing that worries everyone. I only slipped out once, Izuku complained. What did it feel like? Present Mike asked, and Izuku paused. What had it felt like the first time it came in? I ask because I was born with mine, Present Mike added. Most people have vague memories of their quirk coming in, but mine was just that. I don't even remember learning how to control it. I don't think he did, Gremlin whined. His voice is loud. Some people are just like that, Izuku corrected petulantly, because Gremlin needed to stop picking on him. Izuku started to answer as he tried to remember. He was 6. What was it like? You know, you'll have to let it settle in because I'm not sure. That's fair. It was a traumatic event, after all. Memory issues are common, Present Mike soothed. Sorry for asking. It's okay. Izuku replied immediately and hummed, sticking the end of his chopsticks in his mouth to sek on them. What was it like when his quirk came in? He was old enough to remember. Had he just blanked it out? Anyways, thanks for coming over. Asuma cut in and reached over with the back end of his chopsticks to smack Izuku's down. Told you to stop doing that. You already wore out 2 sets. Sorry, Izuku grumbled and reached back in for the rice. This is kinda weird. Asuma never has co-workers over. Deadshot came over last week, Asuma replied, giving Izuku a "don't make me look uncool" look. For work. Izuku was absolutely going to make him look uncool. He couldn't even wait a day. Even if Present Mike was pretty DMN cool. Simp. Where did he even learn that word? Izuku wasn't sure he fully grasped the connotations of the term. Hazutashi definitely has the Lone Ranger roll down pat, Present Mike joked. I can't even remember the last time we went out for drinks. We can never go out for drinks during the school year, Asuma pointed out. Too busy. Well, summer break's coming up, Present Mike said cheerfully. We'll have to drag you out. You know, I think this is the first time I've seen your apartment. I didn't even know where you lived. The scorch mark on the wall is a nice touch, Aizawa drawled. Really adds to the classy element. Show you to, don't be mean, Present Mike said, but his eyes fell on the blaster bolt scorch all the same. Didn't even know you had guns that could do that. I got a new one to test from the support department, but it malfunctioned, Asuma lied through his teeth. I'm never bringing up Star Wars again to them, honestly. You mention you like any science fiction to those nerds and they go nuts. Oh, don't lie, uncle, Izuku chided. You saw a spider and decided never to use the gun again because I wouldn't stop teasing you about it. Asuma kicked him under the table and sent him a warning glance, and Aizawa glanced between the two of them as he tried to piece who actually shot the spider and why Asuma was letting Izuku pull guns out of books. Present Mike, meanwhile, choked on his chicken, fully believing Izuku's story, and Gremlin purred in amusement. Whether it was over Izuku blatantly lying or Present Mike choking was up in the air, but he sure was happy. This was going well. If Izuku had to lie, he was going to have so much fun with it, because what was Asuma going to do? Call him on it? Hazutashi's scared of spiders? Present Mike asked, and Izuku grinned down at his bowl of rice. That it looked poisonous, Asuma said, and Izuku his lower lip into his mouth, struggling to keep it together. You have no room to judge, Zash. You've screamed spiders to death, Aizawa pointed out, and Izuku belatedly realized heroes other than Asuma and no-names like Eraserhead had real names. I was protecting you, Present Mike shot back. He does not seem like he could protect an empty paper bag. I wasn't even home. You wrecked the living room. If it got away, it could have killed you, Present Mike whined, and Aizawa tilted his head at him. A spider could have killed me? I do not believe a spider could kill him. Unless there is Shelob and her spawn here? I swear it had a quirk. Would Shelob being Shelob count as a quirk? Then my quirk would have been better to deal with it. Can we not have a domestic in front of Hazutashi? Could there be a Shelob here? Might we find her? That was a hard no. No, I want to hear more about your theories on why a common spider was somehow a quirked animal hellbent on assassinating a lone underground pro. Oh sure, mock me, but you could have died and I saved your life. He could not even save his dignity. Did you really? I did. That if Sauron ever chose him to be a Nazgul, I would have thrown my own demon self into Mount Doom and saved Tolkien the trouble, Gremlin said, and Izuku couldn't tell if it was a tone of awe or derision. But either way, Izuku found himself choking on his chicken. Excuse me, he whispered and stood up as Asuma shot him a wildly concerned glance. Without another word, Izuku made directly for the bathroom and shut the door extremely firmly before stepping into the meadow so he could bend over and start laughing. Enough to bring tears to his eyes. Please, he hissed. Please, stay quiet, or I won't make it through dinner. You shouldn't like him. Preppy Nazguls are not. How do you say it? Valid. Please stop learning modern slang while you're at being quiet. Present Mike is not supposed to know about you or my quirk, so let's just focus on making me seem like I am a sane human being so he isn't wildly freaked out when I join the hero course. I am not here to help you. Well, you aren't here to do much else, so you might as well cooperate. I will not silence myself in the presence of such a disgrace to the name of the Nazgul. He's not a Nazgul, he doesn't even know black speech, which is disgraceful by the way. And this is not Middle-earth and compost bin. You will go in the bin. I'll put you in the bin. I'd love to see you try, but please behave. I'm asking nicely. You threaten the bin. That's not nicely. You behave, and I will give you 2 passes on the bin. Point 3. 2.5, the half can be negotiated. Deal. Izuku straightened up and took a deep breath, smoothing down the cat shirt before he stepped out of the meadow and back into the bathroom. Plastering a carefully neutral look on his face, he opened the door and made his way back to the dining room. Sorry, he said smoothly as he took his seat. Asuma gave him a what the F dash look and Izuku just picked up his chopsticks to go back to his food. You good? It sounded like you choked, Asuma said carefully. HM? Oh no, I'm fine, Izuku replied cheerfully and jammed a piece of broccoli into his mouth. Great, Asuma said dryly and glanced down at his chest, as if he was staring Gremlin back into Espinman before he reached for the veggies to dump more into his bowl. Sorry about that, little listener, Present Mike said with an easy laugh. Anyways, what are you planning on doing with the medical leave? Well, I have to go to a quirk counselor once I stabilize, and then I have to get a lot of stuff registered, so I think I'll be stuck busy with that and homework, Izuku replied as he shoveled more rice into his mouth. Did the scans come back okay for you to be on your own for the rest of the night? Present Mike asked in concern. Recovery girl said I'd be fine by 9 p.m. Izuku answered with a bright smile. Give or take. Guess we'll be hanging out for a bit, then. Present Mike said cheerfully. So, are you into any heroes? Hazutashi said you weren't a huge fan. Oh, Izuku trailed off awkwardly before shrugging. I used to be, but growing up with a hero you loved dearly was always a complex matter. Before Asuma got hired on at UA, he was constantly coming around with bandages, pulled muscles, black eyes and heavy smiles. He played it off as the dangers of the job, always treated it as a fact of life, but it was never something that was easy to watch. One time, he got sliced down the back, nearly nicked his spine, and Izuku remembered watching from the door of the bathroom as Mom changed his bandages again and again, day after day as he healed. There had been a loud and long argument, and within a week, Asuma had applied to UA, because staff at UA had Recovery Girl in their benefits. It's not fair to Izuku. That's what Mom said. Asuma had to step up when Dad left, fill in that hole, so his sister didn't have to live as a single mother of a quirkless child. He did it selflessly because that was what family did, and their parents were dead, anyways. They were all they had, the 3 of them. Mom had lost her parents, lost her husband, and always lived in fear of losing her son too. They had extended family, of course. Great Aunt Koton, cousin Tsukiko, great Uncle Ryu. But only Asuma knew the truth of Dad's quirk and the truth of Izuku. It created a sort of family dynamic that was very isolated and alone. Their aunts and uncles and cousins were great, of course. How could they not be? They accepted Izuku for his quirklessness, but the majority of them lived in Western Japan. They saw each other twice a year, kept in contact, but it wasn't the same. And growing up being perceived as quirkless didn't exactly instill any form of confidence in heroes, either. Asuma had tried to get Aldra investigated, but it just didn't work. People didn't care. Middle school discriminating against a quirkless kid? If they investigated every quirkless kid being bullied, they wouldn't have the manpower to investigate bullying incidents of the kids that actually mattered. If he couldn't even be confident in his own uncle, one of the best people he knew, being able to stop something, how could he be confident in heroes as a whole? They just upheld the same concepts everyone else did. Quirks were everything. And now Izuku was going to be one of those people, by sheer virtue of having a quirk people could see now. "Oh," Present Mike said quietly, and Aizawa frowned at Izuku. "I like books though," Izuku added brightly, refusing to let this dinner take a nosedive. "I like books a lot." "He's probably got thousands," Asuma added. "I think he's drained my bank account twice with trips to used bookstores." "It's not thousands. It was thousands. At last count, it was 5. The bookshelves currently fit around 4,800 or so, and Izuku had plenty outside of the meadow, but as far as Present Mike knew, it was only the 300 he had in the apartment that were already charged and moved inside. Thank gods his uncle was rich. Nothing wrong with spending money on books. Present Mike said, "What kind of books do you go for?" "Oh, anything with lots of imagination," Izuku replied, probably too slyly. Gremlin trembled in amusement, apparently not appropriately cowed by the threat of compost bins, or lack thereof, but Izuku was willing to forgive it. He was funny. Science fiction and fantasy, mostly, Asuma translated. "I'm pretty sure he's got an encyclopedia of ideas for support items in his head." Izuku did, in fact. He also had multiple journals in the meadow detailing what items in each book he should take out, what pages they were on, what they did, and the rules of each item. After all, he couldn't remember that many books. Gods, his uncle's bank statements had to look ridiculous. They dropped at least 32,000 yen on books every month. "Are you into support items?" Present Mike asked, and Izuku slowly came to understand why he was married to Aizawa. Someone had to carry a conversation after all. "I like to mess around with them," Izuku replied. "I mean, my uncle is Snipe. His quirk works best with support items." "And here I thought you were going into Gen Ed," Present Mike teased. "Hazutashi's been talking about it for the past 6 months. The course I pick is still up in the air," Izuku said carefully. It wasn't, really, but he couldn't very well get a quirk and declare himself a hero hopeful in 24 hours. "I still have a year to decide. Not a lot of time to get ready for UA, though," Present Mike said thoughtfully. "Most support students already have their first draft of their blueprints ready for their test by now." "Oh, I've got that," Izuku said immediately. "And I've aced all the practice tests for the written exam for all the courses. It's just a matter of picking the blueprints, because I have a couple backups." "Oh yeah? Which ones?" Present Mike asked, and a smile flickered around Izuku's mouth. "I figured out how to make a lightsaber. And blasters from Star Wars. It only blew up a few times too. The lightsaber, I mean." Present Mike blinked a few times, apparently flabbergasted by that statement, and Izuku grinned at him. Technically, he just pulled out the blueprint of Dooku's saber out of an old, out-of-print Star Wars novel he found on eBay, and got the blueprints of Jango Fett's blasters from a worn copy of one of Boba's adventures during the rise of the Empire. It would take a little doctoring, since Kyber crystals didn't actually exist, but he did have the blueprints. He liked collecting them. He'd sewn several of them into a book when he was messing around with bookbinding, since his walls were overtaken with posters of his uncle and All Might, and the book of blueprints was easily one of his most prized possessions. "And you thought he was going to Gen Ed?" he asked Asuma directly, and Asuma just smiled and shrugged before shoveling the last of his rice into his mouth. "Izuku's got a lot of passions. He could very well go on to become a librarian," he replied, and Aizawa finally snorted. "Sounds like a dangerous career field," Aizawa said, and Izuku choked as Gremlin vibrated in amusement. "Books are the best weapon in the world," Izuku replied sweetly. "Who knows? I might even become a novelist. I bet I could do a lot." If Asuma had anything in his mouth, it would have been his turn to choke again, but, thankfully, all he could do was cough and kick Izuku under the table while Aizawa stared at Izuku with eyes that were far too sharp. "And what would you write about?" he asked, and Izuku paused, stabbing his rice with his chopsticks. "That I think I'd write about people that were just allowed to be happy," he finally said. "I don't think it'd sell too well though. No one wants to read about someone that's happy." "What do you mean by that?" Present Mike asked as Aizawa's eyes burned into Izuku's head, like he was trying to figure him out. "If the art of happiness sold, Fleetwood Mac would have been." "Nothing really," he said and then shrugged. "Pain is something that's guaranteed. Happiness? Not so much. And people, by and large, want something that's guaranteed. Art is nothing but a lot of promises, and no one likes a broken promise." "You sound way too old, kid," Present Mike said, and then tilted his head. "Then why write about happiness?" Izuku's lips twitched slightly, and then he shrugged. "Someone's bound to be happy. And writing is just wish fulfillment, after all." "Izuku, we talked about..." Asuma trailed off and frowned at Izuku, who looked down at his rice. "Thank you for coming by," he said quietly. "Haven't had a birthday dinner with anyone but Mom and Asuma for a long time. Sorry I'm not that into heroes." "Don't apologize for something like that," Present Mike said immediately. "You're really fine, kid. I think you're pretty cool myself. Don't need to thank us for swinging by. We barely get to see Hazutashi outside of work, anyways. We should be thanking you for hanging out with us on your birthday." Izuku's lips quirked into a half-smile, and despite Gremlin's unconditional detest, he couldn't help but feel like Present Mike was the best hero he'd ever met. "Thanks," he said and ignored the way Gremlin vibrated weirdly against his chest. "Thought you're an English teacher, right?" "That I am. Can you help me with some idioms, since you guys are going to be here for another hour? I'm not understanding all the ways beef works at all, and a lot of more modern English books I have use it way differently than the older ones." "Oh yeah, beef can have several-ish meanings," Present Mike said, and then launched into a lengthy diatribe about beefing, beef up, beef, which led to get your goat actually being tied into horse racing, and then that led to him actually looking up how cold turkey even happened. It was probably the first time Izuku had ever relaxed around another adult in his entire life. It was kind of nice. "Hey, he was a pretty weird kid, wasn't he?" Hizashi asked as the two of them braved the humidity of a mid-July night. Shoyuta hummed, thinking back on how the problem child had saved his apparent bully's life not even 12 hours ago and then immediately gone on to kidnap him and threaten him with a knife. "Seems pretty normal to me," Shoyuta finally replied with a light shrug, and Hizashi let out a laugh. "Never in my life had I met a 15-year-old that gave a shit about English idioms, but okay, babe." They bumped shoulders, and Shoyuta tucked his hands in his jeans, running his thumb along the pro license there. There was no doubt the kid could get that very license. Not a shadow of doubt existed in Shuta's mind. And it wasn't because of his power. No, it was because he understood what pain was. He got it. He could lie like a trickster god, easy as breathing. He clearly had a bit of a petty streak. He was incredibly unstable. His thoughts definitely wandered into dark places. But he had potential. Shoyuta couldn't quite explain it. Maybe it was because his eyes were sharp and playful when he told a lie. But maybe, just maybe, it was because they were sad when he was honest. Not angry. So, if he was going to snap, he would have done it by now. Powerful kids snapped when they were angry. He'd seen it plenty of times. Not many of them held out long enough to hit the point where they were just. So, the kid was a DM martyr, and it was high time someone told him he could be happy. But one thing was for sure. He couldn't go into Snipe's class. He needed to be around adults he could trust, yes. But he needed to be where he trusted someone more than Snipe and his mom. That was the first test, and from the way the kid looked at him, he didn't trust him at all. But he trusted Hizashi. Thinking about lying. "Hizashi," he said suddenly, and then stopped himself. They'd made this promise before. He didn't have to bring it up again. "I don't want to know," Hizashi replied, and Shoyuta let out a low sigh. Hizashi slung an arm over his shoulder, pulled him in close, and kissed him on the cheek. If he's a good liar, he's a dead good one. But you and Hazutashi Esike. Just don't tell me. I'm a fantastic liar. You just live with me, Shoyuta said and pushed him away, but Hizashi just laughed and grabbed his hand to pull him close and kiss him under the dark of the abandoned street. And I'm lucky, he murmured against his lips before pressing another kiss to his lips. But, seriously babe. Don't tell me. Whatever's going on, doesn't matter. He's a kid that needs help. That's all I gotta know. Okay. Okay, Shoyuta whispered and stood there for a moment, memorizing the heat of Hizashi's body burning through the damp of Mizutafu in the summer, before he reluctantly pulled away. And knock that off. Phone cameras are nuts nowadays. Then I'll just have to give you all the kisses when we get home, Hizashi said sweetly, and Shoyuta rolled his eyes at how borderline juvenile he sounded. Yeah. He was lucky. Even if Nizu was making his life hell all over again. Tosh, Zu, they're literally threatening to beat the F out of you. Tosh, I've never reported so much shit in my life. Tosh, I have screenshots. Tosh, you there? Tosh, Zu? Tosh, I really hope you just set your phone down. Tosh, Zu. Where the F are you? Tosh, did you seriously just tell me to look at that and then dipped? Tosh, Zu? Tosh, are you okay? Tosh, you're not okay. Tosh, are they running tests or something? Tosh, DM when you can. Tosh, don't listen to that bullshit. Tosh, why didn't you tell me? Izuku had entirely forgotten he told Tosh to look. In his defense, it had been a very long day for him, and his brain was completely fried. It was beyond fried. He had lost any sense of anything actually. He'd actually forgotten he left his phone in the living room. He'd just gone immediately after Present Mike and Aizawa left to collapse face down in his bed. And then he'd laid there for a good 10 minutes before he remembered his phone wasn't actually with him. Staring at Tosh's texts, Izuku felt something weird overtake him. He and Tosh talked about. Admittedly, they talked about a lot, but they also talked about nothing really personal. Tosh didn't know who his uncle was. He didn't know his mother was a nurse. He didn't know Izuku lived in a penthouse apartment, or that he had no friends at school, or that he was bullied relentlessly. Izuku didn't really know anything about Tosh either. They both knew each other's names. They knew their addresses from a one-off occasion where they found some unknown book the other was searching for and sent it to them. Izuku had picked up things from used bookstores for him, and Tosh commonly returned the favor. They talked about books, movies, mangaka, memes, social issues, things like that. But they didn't know each other. Honestly, part of the reason they were so close was because they didn't talk about their lives. Tosh was barely a 30-minute train ride away, in Tokyo. Izuku could go to school with him, if he wanted. No one really wanted to go to school in Mizutafu, anyways. But there was an unspoken understanding. They both had shit lives. They didn't have to say it out loud, acknowledge it. They both just wanted to pretend everything else wasn't happening. So, with each other, this was what they did. Share everything but what was important. And now a hole had been blown in that. Because Izuku had to move. Zuzu, I don't think sorry can cover a 2-hour ghost, but also, sorry. Zuzu, like really. I am FING up a lot of things today, apparently. Zuzu, sorry. Zuzu, it's my birthday, and my uncle had some of his coworkers swing by to try to cheer me up, and they stuck around for a bit because I'm apparently unstable on a molecular level and one of them could help with that. Zuzu, that sounds bad. Zuzu, I am no longer molecularly unstable. My molecules are stable. Zuzu, and don't worry about the tweets. It's normal. Tosh, okay, what the hell? Tosh, what the actual hell? Tosh, I thought you had like a fed up quirk, not like? I didn't know it was that bad. Zuzu? Tosh, not like that. Sorry. Tosh, not that it's like. But, to be quirkless. Like, everything else is bad. Tosh, gods, what are words? I sound like a FNG? Zuzu, you mean like 70% suicide rate bad? It was probably a cruel thing to say, but it was also about as honest as Izuku was going to get. It was an insanely high suicide rate. Most of quirkless individuals were in the older generations, and in his own generation, there was maybe a 4% birth rate. He'd never even met another actually quirkless person his age. A lot of them didn't even make it to 14. Murder, abuse, SEC trafficking, kidnapping, it was all rampant with quirkless children, and suicide started to escalate around 11 or 12 years old. It rarely even made it onto the news. Soon, there would be no more quirkless people. Facts were cruel. Tosh, yeah, like that. Tosh, what even happened? Izuku took a deep breath as he stared at his phone in the darkness of his room. How did he even begin to answer Tosh's questions? He didn't know. It was beyond him. Zuzu, I wouldn't know where to start. Zuzu, I don't even know what's going on right now. Tosh, yeah, must be a shock. Tosh, teleportation? Zuzu, sort of. Pocket dimension that lets me teleport, I guess. Zuzu, I don't know what's going on. Zuzu, we always knew a stress manifestation was possible. I was never clinically quirkless. All the tests came up with me having the gene. They even did the pinky bone test like it was useful. So we knew it was just sitting around, not wanting to wake up. I was never quirkless. Socially quirkless, not medically. That was me. Zuzu, didn't expect it to be this, but here we are. Tosh, sorry. Zuzu, nothing to apologize for. Tosh, the tweets were effed up. Zuzu, I know. I might just not go there anymore. It's up to me. Tosh, can talk to my mom? She might be able to help. Zuzu, what, you think I'm poor or something? Tosh, no, I mean, my mom knows like lots of people and can help you get into a better school. Somewhere that's not there. Zuzu, it's fine. Tosh. Zuzu, yeah? Tosh. Bro, the news is. Now that I'm not panicking. Is that Snipe? Zuzu, that is Snipe, yes. Tosh. Did that kid just yell that you're his nephew? Zuzu, yes? Tosh, are you effing serious? Tosh, the uncle you live with? Zuzu, yes? In hindsight, there was a lot he probably should have told Tosh. Like, a lot. There was so much. Now it was all out there. Tosh, he works with my mom. Or there was a lot Tosh should have told him. The children and relatives of heroes had it drilled in them from a young age that they were not to just casually discuss things like parents and heroes with others. There was a reason only Katsuki knew Izuku was Snipe's nephew, and that reason was that it was unavoidable in the early days. They were supposed to grow up together. Mom and Mitsuki had been friends in high school. Mitsuki had watched Asuma graduate from UA. But as far as anyone else went, it was on a need-to-know basis. A best friend might find out, but Izuku wasn't going to go blabbing it around at school. After all, it being widely known that Snipe had a quirkless and therefore vulnerable, beloved nephew was going to be salivating material not only for the media, but for any villain wanting to get back at him. And Izuku could definitely do without that kind of attention on him. Okay, there were two women Toshi could be related to. Zuzu, is this seriously why we never talked about family? Tosh, I mean there were a few other reasons. Zuzu, who's your mom? Tosh, Miss Joke. Zuzu. Tosh, is this why mom was on her phone all night? Zuzu, maybe? Asuma never talks about her. I only saw Nizu, Recovery Girl, Eraserhead, and Present Mike. Zuzu. Then again, Asuma barely even mentions Eraserhead, and he liked him enough to invite him to dinner. Tosh. The staff GC must be nuts right now. Zuzu. I saw Eraserhead take one look at it and shut his phone off, so probably. Tosh. So it's your choice to switch schools? Zuzu. Probably won't be the second Asuma actually looks my name up on Twitter instead of peek over my shoulder, but yeah, it's my choice right now. Mom is just going to lose her sheet when she sees it. Tosh. It's a 30-minute commute to Tokyo. Zuzu, bold of you to assume I'd get up early enough to not break the law. Tosh. You just got your quirk and you're already? You know what, NVM, I'd be the same if I had a FING pocket dimension. Zuzu. I've got 1.5 years of school left, I'll probably just switch to homeschooling. Zuzu, been teaching myself for years, anyways. Tosh, so what will you name it? Izuku paused. And then he thought about it some more. What had it been like when he didn't know what he could do? If only he could remember. Zuzu, I nearly died twice today, got a concussion, burned the hell out of my hand, almost drowned, had a quirk come in, ate dinner with if and you present Mike, and accidentally broke into you. I am so beyond quirk names right now. Tosh. This only brings up more questions. Zuzu, as it should. I'm on medical leave and going to bed. I'll explain tomorrow. Closing out the app, he locked his phone and rolled over in bed. Homeschooling was probably the only option now. But at the very least, maybe he could meet Tosh now. Maybe. It was debatable if he actually would. They could bond about some things. Izuku just hated to lie. He solved one problem in a roundabout way, but now it was just opening him up to more. Was he ever going to have a really fulfilling relationship in his life, or was it just going to be like this? He supposed one day he'd tell a spouse the truth. One day. But right now, 6 people knew the truth, and All Might at least knew something was up. So was it even a secret anymore? He didn't even know Aizawa, and Katsuki was trustworthy. Only to a certain point. He did bully Izuku for years, and while they wouldn't be around each other any longer, could he even trust him to hold the truth close to his chest when he wasn't there to monitor him? With the amount of people that knew the truth, could Izuku even allow even one more person to know the truth? Or was he just going to be lonely for the rest of his life? It was a sobering thought. An incredibly sobering thought. He wasn't even sure he could enter a relationship with someone without telling them the reality of what they were signing up for. That didn't even seem fair. Nothing about life was fair, at least. That was about the only thing he could put his faith in anymore. Perhaps it was the only thing he had ever placed his faith in. He could at least put his faith in All Might. Somehow, knowing the truth of the tragedy that had befallen him just made him more to Izuku. Green Eyes found a faded poster of a smiling face and a big thumbs up in the darkness, and Izuku's fingers curled around his phone just a little bit more. Izuku didn't want to be more. Not like that. But with the kind of power he had, eclipsing All Mights in every sense of the word. Did he have a choice?